Chapter 2389. That's basically it. After Yan Gu finished speaking, the room finally quieted down. Mu Hongyu was in a daze. Yan Gu waited for a while. Seeing that she did not move, he waved his hand in front of her eyes. Hongyu. Hongyu. Mu Hongyu came back to her senses and looked at him with a complicated expression. So, you already knew that Lu Yu had the Guqin score, so you went to Yaochen early on? Yan Gu nodded. Yes. But later on, I realized that the Guqin score had already recognized her as its owner, so I came back. There was nothing wrong with this explanation. It was just that Yan Gu omitted the most important one. He really did not dare to say it. Moreover, he was only following his master's instructions. As for the specific reason, only his master knew. He could not say it even if he wanted to. Mu Hongyu was deep in thought. She had heard about the Guqin score long ago. She could not find any fault with Yan Ji's explanation. But, if it's just for the Guqin score, second master Yan, you seem to be taking too much care of Lu Yu, right? Yan Ji's expression immediately turned serious. That's a must. The Guqin score belongs to the palace of the illusory god and is very important. Since she's the owner of the Guqin score, we should do the same. Mu Hongyu asked in return. Since it belongs to the palace of the illusory god, why is Zhenbao Pavilion so concerned about it? Yan Gu coughed. Zhenbao Pavilion and the palace of the illusory god are inextricably linked. We also hope that the Guqin score can return to the palace of the illusory god smoothly. In that case, won't the palace of the illusory god want to snatch Lu Yu's Guqin score? Sigh, that's not the case. Don't you see that the palace of the illusory god is very polite to her now? As long as she's in the palace of the illusory god, doesn't that mean that the Guqin score is also there? Mu Hongyu thought about it and felt that it made sense, but she also felt that something was not quite right. Yan Gu said, I've said everything that needs to be said. Now, you should be satisfied, right? Mu Hongyu took a deep breath and tried her best to calm the waves in her heart. After a while, she said, I understand. After saying that, he got up and was about to leave. Yan Gu hurriedly said, Hey, you promised me that you would keep it a secret. Mu Hongyu frowned. Actually, it doesn't matter even if Lu Yu finds out about this. She's not a petty person. Second Master Yan, what are you worried about? Yan Gu sighed helplessly. I know that. In fact, I've been looking for an opportunity to talk to her, but I haven't found the right time, so it's been delayed until now. Therefore, I would like you to keep this a secret for the time being. I will find an opportunity to apologize to her personally. Mu Hongyu thought for a long time before she finally agreed. It's a deal. After saying that, Mu Hongyu's figure quickly disappeared from the room. Yan Gu heaved a long sigh of relief. Looking at the empty room, he could not help but mutter, looks like I'm really close to breaking through to the Mahayana realm. After leaving the treasure pavilion, Mu Hongyu went back to her own place. At this moment, another silver light flew up and slowly bloomed in the air. She looked up. Qi Han had actually broken through another Grandmaster Xian formation. At this speed, he should be able to enter the palace of the illusory god soon, right? At this thought, Mu Hongyu's eyes turned slightly and looked at the palace of the illusory god. At this moment, Lu Yu should also be paying attention to Qi Han's situation. It would be better for her to look for her later. Besides, she seemed to have touched the threshold of the Mahayana realm. Chapter 2390. 3 months passed by in the blink of an eye. On the Star Road, Qi Han had already reached the final Xian formation. Looking at the final Xian formation beneath his feet, Qi Han let out a long sigh of relief. Not far in front of him, Wan Jianfang was looking at him with a complicated expression. This Qi Han actually came here directly. Even though he took longer than Chu Luiyue, his efficiency was already very shocking. One had to know that the seventh divine envoy, Jin Yunlai, also walked from the beginning to the end and entered the illusory god palace through the Star Road. But Qi Han was even faster. At this moment, the number of onlookers on both sides of the Star Road had decreased by a lot. There was only slightly more than a month left before the Heaven Gate closed. Most people only cared about themselves and didn't have the leisure to care about others. The remaining people were basically certain that they had no hope of ascending to the heavens and becoming a god, so they had already chosen to give up. Of course, there were also many Xian masters who hoped to learn something from Qi Han. They hoped that they could be enlightened like Xiao Ran and break through. Of course, this was actually very difficult. After all, there was only one Xiao Ran in the entire illusory god palace. Qi Han didn't care about this at all. He stared at the Xian formation and raised his hand. A stream of light flew out and quickly condensed into a huge halo in front of him. Obviously, he also planned to use Chu Luiyue and Xiao Ran's method to break this last Xian formation. Ruan Jianfang frowned even more. He wasn't a Xian master, but as a divine envoy, he had a certain understanding of the Star Road and Xian formations. Qi Han's performance on the Star Road was simply too shocking. Such talent was definitely above Jin Yunlai's. Also, he was the same as Chu Luiyue, he didn't have a bloodline totem. There was a reason why Chu Luiyue could enter the illusory god palace. Then, Qi Han shouldn't be able to do it, right? Of course he can enter. Chu Luiyue put down the herbs in his hand and smiled. He has already come this far. How can he not come in and take a look? He could complete the Star Road in a few short months. How difficult would it be for him to enter the illusory god palace? Su Li sat opposite her. Looking at her calm expression, she couldn't help but say, "You really can keep your composure." Even I was so excited that I couldn't help but sneak out to take a look a few times, but you didn't go out even once. Those who didn't know better would think that Qi Han was my subordinate. Whether I go or not, the result will be the same. Chu Luiyue said as he put away the medicinal herbs and stood up. Su Li was surprised. Are you going out? Chu Luiyue nodded. I'm going to see Dumpling. Ever since Dumpling left last time, she had not been here. She thought for a moment and knew that it must have been Yu Qian who gave the order. However, Dumpling couldn't come over, but she could. During this period of time, he had been busy researching the prescription and had not had the time to take care of Dumpling. He had to go and take a look. Su Li nodded her head and sighed in disappointment. It's a little boring to be alone. Chu Luiyue raised his eyebrows. Why hasn't Senior Tang Ke come? In fact, she had wanted to ask this question for a long time. Su Li spent most of her time in the illusory god palace. It was reasonable to say that Tang Ku, who was also a refining saint, should have come. However, he didn't. Su Li rested her chin on one hand. He said that he was practicing refining with Shangguan Jing. It's good that he didn't come, so he won't delay my business. Chu Luiyue said with a smile, it seems that Taizu will break through later. I have to thank Senior Tang Ku and you. Su Li waved her hand. Thank me for what? Chu Luiyue smiled deeply and didn't say anything. Su Li reacted quickly and blushed slightly. Little you don't talk nonsense. I didn't say anything just now. Su Li's face turned even redder. Chu Luiyue didn't tease her. He said a few more words and left. Chu Luiyue came to the door and pushed it open. Ruan Jianfang heard the sound and looked back. Finally, he couldn't hold back and came to take a look. Or was he worried that Qi Han wouldn't succeed, so he came to guide him? Chu Luiyue's gaze swept past the Xian formation in front of Qi Han. Ruan Jianfang said coldly, Shangguan Yu, even if you've succeeded and Qi Han is your subordinate, you can't help him. Otherwise, all his previous results will be invalidated. Chu Luiyue looked at him in surprise. Fifth messenger, you seem to have misunderstood. Do I have the words help written on my face? Besides, do you think Qi Han needs help? Ruan Jianfeng choked. There was really no way to explain this. After all, Qi Han's previous performance was enough to explain everything. Then why did you come out now? Why did you have to come out now of all times? Chu Luiyue smiled warmly. I'm here to cheer for Qi Han. As she spoke, she took a step forward and said to Qi Han, go for it. Then, she really turned around and was about to leave. Ruan Jianfeng, everyone, did you really only say these 2 words when you said you wanted to cheer for him? Qi Han nodded. Thank you, Master. Ruan Jianfeng was also stunned. He subconsciously asked, you're leaving just like that? Chu Luiyue stopped in her tracks. What else can I do? Oh, right, she seemed to have suddenly thought of something and turned around to shout, I'll come back later. I'll be back later. If you go in early, go look for Suli first and wait for me. Yes. Chu Luiyue nodded in satisfaction and smiled at Ruan Jianfeng. Fifth messenger, do you have any other questions? If not, I'll leave now. Ruan Jianfeng's face was cold as he waved his sleeves fiercely. Chu Luiyue's eyes curved as she left with light footsteps. Chapter 2391. Chu Luiyue walked straight and arrived at Fengming Mountain. As soon as she stepped through the barrier, she was shocked. Because not far away on Fengming Mountain, there were actually several balls of flames burning. Those scarlet gold flames seemed to have surged out from the rocks of the mountain. They were incomparably hot and jumping about in joy. Even the nearby space gradually became distorted under the roasting of the flames. On the top of the mountain, Dumpling was sitting cross-legged with her eyes closed. The vast and astonishing energy of heaven and earth was crazily surging into her body. Even the current Chu Luiyue could faintly feel a trace of danger from the pressure on Dumpling's body. No wonder Dumpling had not made any movements recently. It turned out that she was concentrating on her cultivation. The purest bloodline was indeed extraordinary. In just a few short months, Dumpling's strength had already increased at a terrifying rate. In front of Dumpling, the 2 Tian baby had already grown 6 leaves. At this moment, the green leaves were moving with the wind. As they continued to devour the surrounding energy, they urged a portion of the energy to rush into Dumpling's body at an even faster speed. Chu Luiyue watched intently. Dumpling and this 2 Tian baby, in a sense, could be considered to have achieved each other. Seeing that Dumpling was at the critical moment of her cultivation, Chu Luiyue did not step forward. She only stood where she was and waited quietly. Not long after, Dumpling swallowed the last bit of energy. The totem between her brows flashed quickly. Then, she slowly opened her eyes. Ho! Ah, you! Seeing that familiar figure, Dumpling was overjoyed. She quickly got up and ran over. Only then did Chu Luiyue step forward and carry Dumpling up. It was soft and sweet, snow-white and cute. Dumpling's 2 small arms tightly wrapped around her neck. Ah, you! I missed you so much. Why did you come so late? Woo! Chu Luiyue kissed her on the cheek. Aren't I here now? Dumpling was obedient. Dumpling huffed angrily. Originally, I wanted to look for Aayu, but that oracle didn't let me go. Chu Luiyue had already guessed that this was Yu Qian's intention. It doesn't matter. Let's ignore him. Let me see if Dumpling has become much more powerful after not seeing her for a while. When Dumpling heard the praise, she immediately threw all the unhappy things to the back of her mind and revealed a smile that was waiting for the praise. Of course. I'm about to open my 8th meridian. Chu Luiyue was secretly amazed. Fengming Mountain was indeed powerful. Dumpling had only been here for a short period of time, and she was already about to open her 8th meridian. Of course, this also had something to do with Dumpling's bloodline talent. If it was any other Crimson Gold Heavenly Phoenix, they would definitely not be able to compare to Dumpling after staying here for a while. By the way, have you seen the first oracle in the palace of the illusory god? Dumpling's question stunned Chu Luiyue. No. Why are you asking this? Dumpling pouted, rolled her eyes, and said, nothing, I just feel that this first oracle should be more powerful than the second oracle, right? Chu Luiyue smiled and nodded. Of course. If only the first oracle could beat him up. Dumpling said angrily. Chu Luiyue gently scratched her nose. You guessed it right. Some time ago, the second oracle knelt in front of the first oracle's door for 3 days. Dumpling's eyes widened. Really? Why? No one knows the reason, but the punishment was indeed given. And since then, the second oracle has stopped a lot. Anyway, she hadn't seen him for a while. It was understandable. Everyone in the palace of the illusory god knew about his kneeling. No one would want to go out at this time. Dumpling snorted. How is kneeling for 3 days enough? If she had the chance, she would teach him a lesson sooner or later. Chu Luiyue said, Chi-Han is about to finish the star path. Do you want to go with me? Dumpling immediately became happy. Okay. Originally, she was a little worried about Yu Qian's threat, but now that Yu was here and the first oracle had punished him, he probably wouldn't have the time to find trouble with them. I'll go with Yu. At this moment, the Xian formation in front of Chi-Han was more than half completed, and only a few were left. He stared at the Xian formation with full concentration, and his eyes reflected the bright light. Everyone held their breaths and waited. Even Lu Feng became nervous and clenched his fists tightly. Envy was envy. Complaints were complaints. In his heart, he still hoped that Chi-Han could succeed. Finally, Chi-Han's hand trembled slightly, but he firmly pointed at the center. Buzz! In an instant, the last Xian formation was successfully activated by him. On the star path, light shone again. Everyone looked at this scene in shock and speechlessness. In just a few months, this was the 3rd time the same scene had happened. Even though they had already expected this ending, when they saw it for themselves, they couldn't help but be filled with emotions and shock. Why were all of them so heaven-defying? Chi-Han turned around to take a look. The star path was long, and countless stars gathered and spread toward the heavenly gate. A rare faint smile finally appeared on his face. Then, he turned to look at Wan Jianfeng. Wan Jianfeng took a step back and said expressionlessly, "Open the door and you can enter." Although his voice was cold, his eyes were fixed on Chi-Han. Obviously, he was very concerned about this. Chi-Han nodded and walked forward. He placed his hand on the door. It was cold to the touch and extremely heavy. He exerted force, and the tongue at his waist suddenly fluttered in the wind. The door didn't move at all. Wan Jianfeng narrowed his eyes, and a faint sneer appeared on his lips. The illusory god palace had extremely strict requirements for cultivators. Those without a bloodline totem couldn't enter. Previously, Chu Luiyue was only able to enter because of special circumstances. But Chi-Han was different. He definitely couldn't enter the illusory god palace. Chi-Han exerted more force, but the door still didn't open. There wasn't even a crack in the door. Lu Feng frowned. The onlookers also looked at each other. What was going on? Was Chi-Han really going to be rejected? Suddenly, Chi-Han stopped and took half a step back. Wan Jianfeng thought that he was going to give up. He said calmly, "I told you long ago that you can't open this door. Giving up now doesn't count as. Chi-han ignored him. He stepped forward again and pushed. Ruan Jianfeng sneered. What are you still thinking? Creak. Before Ruan Jianfeng could finish his sentence, the door opened slowly. Everyone was stunned on the spot. Chi-han looked ahead calmly. Suddenly, he grabbed Tuan Xinz, which was hanging on his waist. Chapter 2392. Tuan Xinz, which was swaying in the wind, suddenly quieted down. The words on it, which were so obvious that they were about to burst out of it, also faded a lot and returned to its original appearance. Chi-han looked forward. The majestic and sacred palace of the illusory god stood quietly. He slowly tightened his grip on Tuan Xinz. It seems that we came at the right time. A clear female voice broke the deathly silence in the area. Everyone subconsciously looked back and saw Chu Luyue holding Dumpling's hand and walking toward them. Hearing this, Chi-han also looked over. He silently released Tuan Xinz in his hand and bowed in salute. Chi-han greets master. Chu Luyue smiled and said, "Why are you so particular? You just finished the star path, and it's time to celebrate." Dumpling also raised her face and gave him a thumbs up. "Brother Chi-han, you're amazing." Chi-han's gaze fell on Dumpling's face, and a smile quickly flashed across his eyes. "Since it's a coincidence, let's go in together." "Master," Lu Feng's pitiful voice came from the side. Chu Luyue coughed. "Lu Feng, continue to work hard." "Lu Feng, is this something that can be achieved by hard work?" "Master, do you have some misunderstanding about hard work?" Chu Luyue thought for a while and comforted her. "Don't worry, although you're not the first, as long as you're not the last." Lu Feng. "Master, this kind of comfort is better not to give." Dumpling waved her hand. "Brother Lu Feng, we're leaving first." Lu Feng, she couldn't stay here any longer. Looking at Lu Feng, who was about to go berserk, Chu Luyue finally mercifully swallowed the rest of his words. If this went on, Lu Feng might really go crazy. She looked at Ruan Jianfeng and smiled. "Fifth Oracle, don't you want to go in together? I'll have to trouble you to arrange Chi-han's residence. Of course, if you're too lazy to go, you can let Chi-han live next door." Ruan Jianfeng's chest seemed to be surging with emotions. Until now, he still couldn't figure out how Chi-han had opened the door. But now was obviously not the time to pursue these matters. He didn't reply to Chu Luyue and walked inside with a sullen face. At this moment, a familiar voice came from behind. "Wait." Chu Luyue turned his head and said in surprise, "Hongyu. Why are you here?" Suddenly, her voice paused as she looked at Mu Hongyu. Her eyes were filled with shock. Mu Hongyu seemed to be different from before. On the surface, Mu Hongyu did not seem to have changed. However, when she walked over, the surrounding space actually flowed slowly with her. Every movement of hers seemed to be exceptionally relaxed and natural. It was like a gust of wind, moving freely. She was clearly not walking fast, but in the blink of an eye, she was already in front of everyone. Most importantly, it didn't cause the slightest energy fluctuation. "You broke through?" Chu Luyue asked in surprise. Mu Hongyu's almond-shaped eyes sparkled. "Yes. I came to find you as soon as I succeeded. I didn't expect to meet you here." As she spoke, she looked at Ruan Jianfeng. "Fifth Divine Envoy, let's go in together." Since she had reached the Mahayana realm, she naturally had the right to enter the illusory god's palace. Even Ruan Jianfeng, who had seen many big scenes, was shocked at this moment. Mu Hongyu blinked. "Fifth Divine Envoy, I won't stop you from entering, right? Do I have to open the door myself?" "But I can go through the door directly, so I don't have to, right?" Ruan Jianfeng's eyelids twitched violently. It took him a lot of effort to suppress the emotions in his heart. He turned around without saying a word and walked towards the illusory god's palace. Chu Luiyue raised her chin at Mu Hongyu and smiled. You came at the right time. Let's go in together. Mu Hongyu and Qi Han chose to sit next to Chu Luiyue without hesitation. Ruan Jianfeng agreed very quickly and left in a hurry without saying anything. The situation had exceeded his expectations. He had to discuss with the other divine envoys as soon as possible on how to deal with it. Mu Hongyu shrugged at Ruan Jianfeng's back. He left so quickly. Why are these divine envoys so cold? Chu Luiyue pulled her into the house. Qi Han, guard outside the door and don't let anyone in. Qi Han nodded. Yes. Mu Hongyu followed Chu Luiyue into the house. Chu Luiyue still carefully set up a barrier just in case. Then, she looked at Mu Hongyu. Hongyu, are you 100% confident? Mu Hongyu nodded slightly. As long as there are no accidents, we will definitely be able to bring Master back this time. Chu Luiyue exhaled, and her heart beat quickly. Now is the best time. Everyone had seen them enter the illusory god palace. No one would have thought that at this time, they would quietly sneak into the illusory god sea. Mu Hongyu's expression was firm. Let's go together. Chu Luiyue looked at Dumpling. Dumpling, wait here first. The contract between her and Dumpling could not be known to others. Then, Dumpling could only stay here temporarily. Dumpling nodded seriously. Dumpling will definitely wait here obediently. Ah, you must be careful. Chu Luiyue touched her little face. Hongyu, let's go. Mu Hongyu held her breath and raised her hands. Then, the space in front of her started to ripple like water. She grabbed Chu Luiyue's hand and stepped in. The two figures disappeared in an instant. Chapter 2393. On the illusory god sea, a silver bridge stood quietly, extending from the divine gate to the bottom of the sea. The surface of the water was sparkling. However, the sea further away was still dark, treacherous, and mysterious. A cold wind blew across the surface of the sea, bringing with it a bone-chilling chill. It was dark all around. Tyrannical and terrifying spatial turbulence was constantly surging around. Fortunately, Mu Hongyu had already set up a barrier in advance to protect the two of them. Chu Luiyue could clearly hear the sound of those forces hitting the barrier, and couldn't help but exclaim secretly. The Mahayana realm was indeed powerful. The current Mu Hongyu could not only directly tear through space, but she could also control the power of the surrounding space. Even a venerable god powerhouse couldn't do this. Up ahead is the place you mentioned before. Mu Hongyu said. She had come to the illusory god sea several times before, and had a rough understanding of the situation here. She clearly knew the location of Chu Luiyue's first visit to the illusory god sea. Out of convenience, she still brought Chu Luiyue here. In this way, they might be able to find Diwu Zhangzi faster. Chu Luiyue nodded. If Senior Diwu is still trapped in that place, everything will be easy. The last time she came, it was because Diwu Zhangzi was trapped in the surroundings, and there was an extremely tight defense. She didn't dare to act rashly alone. But this time, she teamed up with Mu Hongyu, and the odds of success were much higher. After a while, Chu Luiyue suddenly felt a light in front of her. We're here. Mu Hongyu whispered. As she spoke, she exerted force and pulled Chu Luiyue out of the interspace. A squeezing force quickly crushed her body. But fortunately, this was not a problem for Chu Luiyue now. The sight in front of her gradually became clear. She looked around. It's here, right? Mu Hongyu asked. Chu Luiyue nodded, and then pointed below her. Over there, a hazy ball of light flickered. Even though there was still a considerable distance between them, they could still clearly feel the astonishing pressure from it. Mu Hongyu made up her mind. Master is right there. Now, all they had to do was set off from here, pass through the chaotic space below, and directly arrive at Diwu Zhang's location. Then, they would be able to leave successfully. Mu Hongyu said and waved her hand. Then, Chu Luiyue felt that the surrounding spatial energy that was about to crush him was gradually moving away. Then, a spatial crack appeared in front of Mu Hongyu. Mu Hongyu stepped inside. However, right at this moment, the voice of a young woman that was filled with rage suddenly sounded out. Who is it? Mu Hongyu and Chu Luiyue were both shocked. There was actually someone here. The two of them looked at each other and immediately came to a consensus. They had to act as soon as possible. But it was too late. A vigorous and unparalleled force suddenly swept over from the deep sea. Chu Luiyue pulled Mu Hongyu behind her and narrowly avoided it. However, the spatial crack in front of the two of them collapsed along with it. Bang! Seeing this, the two of them felt their hearts sink. Their whereabouts had been discovered. It was almost impossible to rescue Diwu Zhangzi now. Chu Luiyue made a prompt decision. Let's go. Mu Hongyu quickly nodded. At the same time, she waved her hand and forcefully tore open the space again. The only thing they could do now was to escape from this place as soon as possible. However, just as she tore open the space, the long whip swung over again. Smack! The road ahead was cut off again. Then, a young woman with a delicate figure quickly came from the deep sea. Who is it? How dare you trespass into the illusory god sea? As soon as she finished speaking, she had already blocked in front of Chu Luiyue and Mu Hongyu. It was a woman who looked no more than 15 or 16 years old. She had delicate features and a pair of green eyes. The 12th Oracle. Chu Luiyue was shocked. She had heard of this name long ago, but had never seen her before. Unexpectedly, she was guarding the illusionary god sea. Bailing looked at the two of them with undisguised anger on her face. When her eyes fell on Mu Hongyu, she smiled coldly. It was you the previous few times, right? Humph, I've been waiting for you for a long time. Chu Luiyue's heart sank. The 12th Oracle was hiding her strength and had obviously been waiting here for a long time. It would be difficult to leave this place smoothly. You two are really bold. How dare you trespass in the illusionary god sea? Bailing had been guarding here all year round, so she didn't know them. She held the long whip in one hand and gently tapped the other palm. She glanced down at the ball of light below. The person imprisoned there is the biggest traitor of the illusionary god palace. The Divine Lord wants to punish him. How dare you come to save him? You must be tired of living. Chu Luiyue narrowed her eyes. Traitor. Diwu Zhangzi. Those who trespass without permission will be sentenced to death. Bailing swung the long whip in her hand. It's your honor to be killed by me personally. Smack! The long whip flew out in an instant. At the same time, the surrounding space began to crazily squeeze toward the two of them. Mu Hongyu was about to attack when she suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. Chu Luiyue supported her and turned around to stand in front of her. She saw that the long whip was about to hit her back. The biting cold almost made her ears buzz, and it was extremely painful. At this moment, an indifferent and low voice sounded. Bailing, stop. Bailing was shocked and hurriedly turned to look. The first oracle. Chu Luiyue's heart shook when she heard this voice. Her body stiffened, and she slowly turned to look at the newcomer. Chapter 2394. The sea was cold and the waves were surging. The sound of the long whip seemed to be echoing in her ears. Chu Luiyue stared blankly at the person not far in front of her. For a moment, she almost thought that she was in a dream and that everything was just an illusion. When Mu Hongyu heard the commotion, she was also shocked and hurriedly looked up. The first oracle is here. When that person's face came into view, Mu Hongyu's voice also stopped abruptly. She almost subconsciously looked at Chu Luiyue. Her lips moved slightly as if she wanted to say something, but she didn't know how to start. There was silence all around. Chu Luiyue could even clearly hear the sound of her heart beating. Her fingertips curled slightly, and a chill came out of nowhere and wrapped around her. This person was so familiar, yet so unfamiliar. His features were handsome and his figure was tall and straight. Wearing a well-cut grayish-blue robe, he had a bit of a cold and noble aura that people could only look up to and not climb. He was indeed very different from how he looked in her memory. But his eyes were so familiar, as if they were carved into her heart like a knife. She fixed her gaze on the person in front of her, and the corners of her lips gradually raised into a faint smile. But there was no smile in those starry eyes. Instead, it seemed to be covered with a faint layer of mist, making it difficult to see clearly. She said softly, "Mu Qinghe. Is it fun to lie to me?" The palace of the illusory god. Dumpling was alone in the room. She touched the teacup, touched the table, and even opened the jade bottles on the bookshelf to smell them. When there was nothing else to play with, she finally lay straight on the bed. Her whole body stretched out like the Chinese character. Looking at the curtain above, she mumbled, "So boring, knock knock." Someone knocked on the door suddenly from outside. Dumpling suddenly jumped up. "Ah, you is back." But just as she ran to the door, she suddenly stopped. That's not right. If you and the others came back, they should have come straight to this room. Why did they have to knock on the door? Dumpling pursed her lips and walked back. It should be someone else, right? But you said not to open the door for anyone. Chi Han was outside. He would definitely stop them. Sure enough, the knocking sound disappeared. Dumpling lazily walked back and climbed onto the bed. Suddenly, there was another knock on the door. Most importantly, he was knocking on the door. Dumpling frowned in confusion. Who? Chi Han's voice sounded. Dumpling, someone's looking for you. Dumpling was dumbfounded. Looking for me? At this time, who would come looking for her? She thought for a while, but couldn't come up with an answer. But Chi Han seemed to have let them in. That shouldn't be a problem, right? Thinking of this, Dumpling shouted, "He's here." With that, she ran to open the door. Creak, the door opened a crack. Dumpling poked her head out and looked around vigilantly. "Brother Chi Han, who's looking for me?" Chi Han looked down at her little head and reminded, "Look up." Ha! Dumpling looked up instinctively. Chi Han was standing in front of the door, looking at her helplessly. Whoosh. Before she could finish, a green shadow pounced on her. Before Dumpling could see anything clearly, she felt two claws grabbing her hair tightly. She was instantly annoyed. Don't grab my hair." With that, she raised her hand to fight back. But at this time, only her head was exposed. Her body was inside the door, and she couldn't do anything for a while. She could only let the other party grab her hair. I'm going to be angry." Dumpling's voice suddenly rose an octave. Chi Han sighed helplessly and grabbed a certain person who was doing evil. "If you have something to say, wait for Dumpling to come out." With that, he helped Dumpling open the door. Dumpling was released and immediately heaved a sigh of relief. However, the pain from her scalp still made her very angry. She looked up angrily. "I think you're looking for, Red Demon." The anger in her heart instantly dissipated, leaving only deep shock and disbelief. The green sparrow in front of her had green feathers and red eyes. Wasn't it Red Demon? But wasn't Red Demon already dead? Red Demon. You're not dead. Tuanzi suddenly realized something and screamed out loud. Then, she suddenly recalled everything that had happened before and gasped in shock. It's you. It's you who was at Phoenix Cry Mountain. Right. Red Demon didn't answer. It just struggled to flap its wings. Only then did Chi-Han let go. Red Demon flew over, bit the corner of Dumpling's skirt, and began to pull her out. Dumpling hurriedly said, "Wait. I haven't made myself clear." Red Demon suddenly turned around and glanced at her. Just this glance made Dumpling's heart skip a beat. After being stunned for a moment, Dumpling immediately followed. "I'll go with you." They had been together for too long. Even if Red Demon didn't say anything, Dumpling knew that something had happened just by looking at its eyes. Chi-Han frowned slightly, but he didn't stop her. Dumpling ran 2 steps before she remembered something and looked back. "Brother Chi-Han, Chi-Han nodded. "Be careful." Dumpling calmed down and nodded hard. She immediately turned around and followed Red Demon. The 2 silhouettes left quickly, gradually disappearing from sight. Chi-Han didn't look away until they were out of sight. He turned to look at the main hall of the palace of the illusory god. It was towering, standing, and cold. Chapter 2395. Hong Yao and Dumpling soon arrived at the Divine Gate. At this moment, it was as deserted as ever. There was only one figure standing with his hands behind his back. It was Wu Yao. He looked up at the Divine Gate and frowned. This Divine Gate. He had been looking at it for many days, and he didn't like it no matter how he looked at it. And his hands were itching. Even he was convinced of his own abilities. Isn't it just a broken door? What's there to care about? But every time he made up his mind to leave, he would always waver and continue to stay here. Wu Yao had been here for several months since he came to the Illusion God Palace. He hesitated for a long time before finally reaching out his hand tentatively. However, before he touched the Divine Gate, he suddenly heard a sound behind him. Wu Yao immediately stopped and looked back vigilantly. When he saw who it was, he immediately heaved a sigh of relief. "Dumpling, why are you here?" As he spoke, he turned his gaze and saw a green sparrow beside Dumpling. "This is Hong Yao." Wu Yao was taken aback. However, before he realized what had happened, Dumpling had already run over. "Brother Wu Yao. Get out of the way." Wu Yao subconsciously took a step back and hurriedly reminded her, "Dumpling, wait, here, bang." Dumpling bumped into the transparent barrier, took a few steps back, and sat on the ground. "There's a barrier." Dumpling rubbed her head and stood up. Only then did Wu Yao see her appearance clearly and couldn't help but be shocked. "Dumpling, what's wrong with your hair?" One side of her hair was fine, but the other side was loose with a few strands of hair hanging down. It looked like she had just finished fighting with someone, and it was the kind of hand-to-hand combat. Tuanzi was embarrassed at once, but it was not the time to care about this. She hurriedly asked, "Brother Wu Yao, can you open this barrier? Hong Yao and I want to go out." Wu Yao was speechless. "Dumpling seems to have some misunderstanding about me." Seeing the two of them so anxious, he shook his head and said, "Only the divine envoys in charge of guarding the gate of heaven can open this barrier." "What happened? Why are you in such a hurry to leave?" Dumpling shook her head like a rattledrum. "Brother Wu Yao, there's no time to explain. Who was guarding the divine gate now? I'll go find him." Before Wu Yao could speak, a voice suddenly came from behind the few of them. "Why are you going out?" Dumpling turned around. The person who had arrived was none other than the 11th divine envoy, Chiao Tong. As soon as he noticed the disturbance in the barrier, he immediately rushed over. However, he did not expect that the one who caused all this trouble was Dumpling. And there was a green sparrow beside it. Chiao Tong's eyes fixed on Hong Yao for a moment, and she frowned slightly. This cyan sparrow wasn't a divine beast. There didn't seem to be such a magical beast in the illusory god palace. Don't ask so much. There was no time. Dumpling patted the barrier forcefully. Open it. If you don't open it, I'll die in front of you. Chiao Tong was speechless. Wu Yao covered his face. What's with this inexplicable sense of embarrassment? Chiao Tong's expression turned serious. No. No. Why not? Dumpling was instantly enraged. Chiao Tong felt that Dumpling was purely being unreasonable, so she didn't care about what she said at all. Not everyone can enter and exit the divine gate as they wish. You can't either. Dumpling glanced at Hong Yao, then immediately gritted her teeth, and the pressure around her suddenly erupted. Bam! A ball of reddish-gold flames instantly flew out and landed heavily on the barrier. Boom! A loud sound spread far and wide. Flames burned wildly in Dumpling's eyes. Are you going to open it or not? Illusory God Ocean. Chu Liuyue's voice was very soft, but everyone heard it clearly. Bailing's expression immediately turned cold, and her long, shapely eyebrows furrowed. How dare you? How dare you call the name of the first divine envoy directly? Chu Liyue laughed as if she had heard a joke. She tilted her head and looked at Mu Qinghe. Mu Qinghe, tell her, do I have the right to call you that? Bailing turned her wrist and was about to attack again. I think you really don't know who you are. In the Illusion God Palace, even the second divine envoy, Yu Qian, didn't dare to speak to the first divine envoy in such a tone. And this woman was too arrogant. A hand suddenly reached out and blocked Bailing's long whip. He didn't seem to use much strength, but Bailing instantly felt that the long whip was tightly clamped, and she couldn't move it at all. Bailing, don't you understand what I just said? Mu Qinghe said lightly, but her tone was unquestionable and domineering. Bailing was shocked, and a deep sense of respect flashed across her eyes. She immediately took a step back and said, Bailing doesn't dare. Only then did Mu Qinghe toss the long whip over. Bailing hurriedly caught it and didn't dare to say another word. She looked at Chu Liyue in shock. This woman knew the first divine envoy. And they seemed to have a close relationship. Otherwise, she wouldn't have dared to speak to the first divine envoy like that. But this woman seemed to have just come from the outside. How could the first divine envoy interact with such a person? Mu Qinghe looked at Chu Liyue. Indeed. It had been a long time since they last met. Compared to before, she was even more beautiful. Even in the dark and cold bottom of the sea, she was still as dazzling as a pearl. After a long while, he finally said, the day Diwu Zhangzi betrayed the Illusion God Palace, it was destined that this would happen. The Mahayana realm is indeed not bad, but you've probably forgotten that Diwu Zhangzi is also in the Mahayana realm. If even he can't escape from here, it's even more impossible for you. Mu Hongyu bit her lip. Leave in half an hour, and I'll let bygones be bygones. The first divine envoy. Bailing looked at him in disbelief. These two people sneaked into the Illusion God Sea several times and even tried to kidnap Diwu Zhangzi. How can we just let them go after committing so many crimes? Yes, how can we just let them go? Chu Liyue said and took a step forward. Mu Hongyu wanted to hold her hand, but she paused halfway through. She didn't know what to do now, no wonder she felt a little familiar before. It turned out that, but why was the first divine envoy Mu Qinghe? Let bygones be bygones, Chu Liyue said slowly, mulling over these words with a faint smile. Mu Qinghe, Are you qualified to say this to me? Her gaze fell on Mu Qinghe's face and scanned it bit by bit. This person was once the person she trusted the most. But now, he stood in front of her with such an identity and told her that he was willing to let bygones be bygones. Suddenly, her gaze froze. There seemed to be a burn mark on the side of Mu Qinghe's ear. Was it left behind by the fire? Then, she looked into his eyes, as if she wanted to find an answer from those eyes that were as calm and indifferent as a dark pool. You haven't answered my question. Mu Qinghe, I gave you this name. Why can't I call you that? Digression, I wanted to write more, but something happened when I went out in the afternoon, so I didn't have time. This should be the last time the miracle doctor is going to update. Thank you to Lizzie's scepter, cloak, and yacht. Thank you to Hoof 36 Lulu. Thank you to a certain cloak whose name is a string of messy WeChat characters but is at the top of the fan list. Thank you to all the friends who sent me flower diamond bomb. Thank you to all the big cuties who gave the Miracle Doctor monthly tickets and recommendation tickets. Thank you to all of you. Chapter 2396. The streets of the city were bustling with noise. His clothes were ragged and he was being bullied. She held out her hand to him. She said, "Come with me." It was a snowy night with a light breeze. In the quiet palace, he was at a loss for what to do and felt uneasy. She handed the pen over. She said, "Let me teach you." She thought that since she was the one who brought him back, he would belong to her from now on. Of course, she would have to give him a name and keep him safe. Mu Qinghe, Mu Qinghe. She gave him a name, gave him a place to live, and gave him everything. And in the end, what did he leave her? Most likely, everything had been burned to ashes in that fire. She knew that she wasn't a pure and kind person. She had always taken revenge, even 10 times or 100 times over. There were many people who wanted to kill her and take her life. They wanted to see her fall from the clouds into a quagmire, unable to struggle. But he definitely shouldn't be one of them. When Chu Liyue saw that Mu Qinghe had also died in that fire, he thought that everything was over. All the injustices in the past should be gradually erased along with life and death. However, Mu Qinghe was not dead. Not only did he not die, he even transformed into the #1 divine envoy of the illusory shrine. So noble, so unfamiliar. Mu Qinghe looked calm and indifferent. No emotion could be seen in her eyes. He looked at her as if he was looking at an insignificant person whom he had only met a few times. That is all I have to say, he said indifferently. Bai Ling, who was at the side, was already completely dazed when Chu Liyue spoke. What did she say? Did she give the name of the first oracle? What was going on? Moreover, the first oracle did not refute him. Did he agree with her words? Where did this woman come from? Chu Liyue raised his eyebrows slightly. Are you unwilling to tell me, or are you afraid to tell me? Is it very difficult for you to admit this? I don't want to fight you. What a coincidence, me too. The corners of Chu Liyue's lips curled up into a smile as he sized him up again. First divine envoy. How can I be your opponent? As the second divine envoy, Yu Qian's realm was above her eminences. Mu Qinghe was able to make Yu Qian kneel outside the door for 3 days and 3 nights. Naturally, she was stronger than him. In just a few short years, everything had changed. Mu Qinghe paused for a moment and then asked, "What do you want?" Chu Liyue had never expected to hear such a sentence from Mu Qinghe. However, compared to the impact his true identity had on her, this was nothing. The smile on her face gradually disappeared, as if it was covered with a thin layer of frost. Since you already know, then I'll be frank. What I want is very simple, let Di Wuzhangzi leave. That's impossible, Mu Qinghe immediately denied. Regarding this matter, I've already made it clear enough. For the sake of our past relationship, I'll let you go this time. But there won't be a next time. If you come again, I won't be merciful. Merciful? Chu Luiyue narrowed his eyes and sneered. When you killed me back then, you didn't seem to be merciful either, did you? Mu Qinghe's hands slowly clenched by her sides. Chu Luiyue stared at her with a half-smile. I must save Diwu Zhangze. If I don't succeed this time, there will be a next time, and a time after that. Since the illusory god ocean is under your control, then. I think, why don't we act today and get rid of all future troubles? She raised her head slightly, revealing her slender and fair neck. Mu Qinghe, if you have the ability, kill me again. Mu Qinghe's eyes seemed to surge with emotions, but they quickly disappeared. He stared at her and said slowly, do you think I don't dare? As soon as he finished speaking, he flicked his wrist and a sharp sword appeared in his palm. Swoosh! The cold blade was pressed against her neck. Mu Qinghe! Mu Hongyu immediately exclaimed. Are you crazy? Although she didn't know much about Mu Qinghe, she knew a little. In the Tianling dynasty, who didn't know that Mu Qinghe was groomed and promoted by the princess? She was shocked for a long time when she heard that Mu Qinghe had betrayed Chu Luiyue. Because she couldn't understand how Chu Luiyue could do such a thing when he treated such a person with sincerity. Even now, he had become the first oracle, but he still wanted to attack Chu Luiyue. Mu Qinghe ignored Mu Hongyu. Chu Luiyue suddenly laughed, but there was no surprise in his eyes. Hongyu, why are you so shocked? It's not the first time he's done this. Maybe it'll be easier this time. Mu Qinghe's expression was piercingly cold. A majestic aura descended, and he flipped his wrist and was about to slash down. At that instant, an extremely nervous voice could be heard. Stop! Immediately after, a reddish gold flame flew over from afar and landed heavily on the sword. At the same time, a green shadow crashed into Mu Qinghe's wrist. His hand was slightly deflected, and the long sword narrowly brushed past Chu Luiyue's shoulder. There was a slight pain. Chu Luiyue glanced sideways. There was a shallow cut on his shoulder, and dark red blood gradually seeped out, staining the ground. A small person stood in front of him. It was Dumpling. Don't bully you. Chu Luiyue frowned slightly. Dumpling, why are you here? Didn't I ask her to wait in the palace of the illusory god? Dumpling quickly turned around and saw the wound on his shoulder. She was so angry that her face turned red. If she came a moment later, Chu Luiyue hugged her and patted her back gently. Dumpling, don't worry. I'm fine. Tuanzi pursed her lips, and her big black grape-like eyes were red and full of tears. Chu Luiyue touched her messy hair. How did you end up like this? Suddenly, she paused and looked up as if she sensed something. A palm-sized green sparrow was looking at her from not far away. Green flames covered its long feathers, and its eyes were as beautiful as the most precious rubies. It was exactly the same as in her memory. Hong Yao. Chu Luiyue was stunned, and his lips moved slightly. Just now, it was the red sparrow that knocked away Mu Qinghe's hand. Hong Yao looked at her without blinking, and big drops of tears fell silently. Chu Luiyue's heart suddenly seemed to be twisted by something, and it was sour and painful. She pursed her lips and said softly, Hong Yao, come here. Red Demon took a step forward subconsciously, but it only took one step before it came to its senses and stopped. Mu Qinghe was right behind it. Now that the two of them were confronting each other, it could only stay here. As more and more tears fell, Hong Yao waved its wings fiercely, buried its head under its wings, and wiped it. It couldn't bear to look at her, but it would cry again, as if it couldn't stop. It was so embarrassing. But, it missed her so much. Chapter 2397. Mu Qinghe's gaze fell on Hong Yao, cold and indifferent. Hong Yao. Hong Yao suddenly turned around and looked at him angrily. Why did he attack? Mu Qinghe's gaze was as cold as ice, chilling to the bone. The first divine envoy. Chiao Tong, who had followed behind Dumpling and Hong Yao, looked at the scene in front of him in shock. What was going on? The first divine envoy was actually here. Although the illusionary god Ocean was indeed under his control, hadn't he always stayed in his courtyard all these years and never went out? It was said that even when he punished the seventh divine envoy, Jin Yunlai, he only sent out a wisp of his aura and didn't appear at all. But now, this was clearly the first divine envoy himself. Beside the first divine envoy stood Bailing. Chiao Tong knew that she had been guarding the depths of the illusionary god Ocean, so he wasn't surprised to see her. But the key point was, the two women standing in front of the first divine envoy, Sheng Wanyu. Mu Hongyu. Why are you here? Mu Qinghe glanced at him. Chiao Tong, you're really competent as the Heavenly Gate Guardian. Chiao Tong's heart skipped a beat. Chiao Tong is incompetent. Countless guesses instantly surged in his mind. Could it be that Mu Hongyu had broken through to the Mahayana realm? That was the only way the two of them could come to the illusionary god Ocean so quietly. Moreover, they actually alarmed the first divine envoy. Just take it as a warning to you. If you don't believe me, you can try again. Mu Qinghe said coldly. These words were obviously directed at Chu Liyue. Chu Liyue's lips curled into a sneer. Okay. Mu Hongyu stepped forward and grabbed her arm. Liu, let's go back first. The current situation definitely couldn't continue. They could only leave this place first and think of another way later. Looking at Mu Qinghe's posture, he would really do it. Chu Liyue hugged Dumpling tightly and glanced at Mu Qinghe. I will take back what belongs to me. Mu Qinghe did not say anything. Mu Hongyu tore open a spatial crack and pulled Chu Liyue away. Even though Mu Qinghe and the others had already found out about it, the fewer people who knew about it, the better. Seeing the two of them leave so openly, Bailing finally couldn't hold back anymore and said, First Oracle, are you really going to let them go just like that? They were so arrogant and unbridled. Not to mention her, they did not even put the first divine messenger in their eyes. Could it be that the first oracle's heart had softened? Just because of that Chu Liyue? Bailing couldn't figure it out. As oracles, they had always been high and mighty. When had they ever been provoked like this? Especially since the person being targeted was the first oracle with the highest status. Mu Qinghe glanced at her. Bailing's heart skipped a beat, and she quickly swallowed the rest of her words. She was also muddle-headed to dare to question the first oracle in front of her. I don't want to hear about what happened today from anyone else, understand? Bailing and Chiao Tong understood and immediately said, yes. Mu Qinghe put away his sword and looked at Hong Yao. Hong Yao ignored him and quickly turned to leave. Mu Qinghe frowned slightly, but he didn't say anything. The water rippled, and his figure quickly disappeared. Farewell, first oracle. After a while, after confirming that Mu Qinghe had indeed left, Bailing and Chiao Tong heaved a sigh of relief. The two of them looked at each other with complicated expressions. What happened just now? Chiao Tong asked. Bailing's face was cold. What else could it be? Those two secretly came several times before, trying to kidnap Di Wu Zhangse. I already knew something was wrong, so I waited here. When I finally caught them and was about to kill them, the first oracle came. Moreover, the two women seemed to know the first divine emissary, especially the one in red. Sheng Wanyu. Yes, it's her. She seemed to have a close relationship with the first oracle, but I didn't know what was going on after listening for a long time. After the first oracle warned them, he planned to let them go. I tried to stop him, but the first oracle warned me. Qiu Tong frowned. The first oracle is protecting them like this. Bailing thought for a while and said, not really. After all, the first oracle had already attacked just now, but he was stopped by the crimson gold sky phoenix and the blue sparrow. You know what happened after that? I'm sure that they did have dealings with each other. I just don't know what happened. It was extremely difficult to find out if it was related to the first oracle. Right, speaking of the blue sparrow. I don't remember the first oracle having a contract with a fiend beast. When I saw the blue sparrow at the gate of heaven, I was wondering when there was one in the illusion god palace. So it's with the first oracle? Bailing was annoyed. How would I know? It was obvious that there was something wrong here. If the first oracle wanted to hide it, who would know? Qiu Tong frowned. I still think there's something fishy about this. There were so many problems in the past, but the first oracle didn't show up. Why did he come this time? And he even ordered us to keep quiet about what happened today. Was there really no other reason? Bailing didn't think so. This is the illusion god ocean. The first oracle has been in charge of it for 10,000 years. Now that something happened, isn't it normal for him to come? Moreover, Shengguan Yu and the other two had quietly crossed the divine gate and arrived here. They had almost kidnapped Diwu Zhangze. If this gets out, not only you and me, but also the first oracle will be criticized. Do you want to make a big deal out of it? Qiu Tong quickly waved her hand. How is that possible? I just think it's a little strange, so I said it casually. However, what you said is not without reason. It involves Diwu Zhangze and the illusion god ocean. It's normal for the first oracle to be cautious. Forget it. Anyway, the first oracle has already said that if they come again, they will be punished severely. Let's just do our job. Bailing turned and dived into the depths of the sea. Qiu Tong stayed for a while and finally left. Chu Luiyue and the others soon returned to the illusion god palace. She put Dumpling down and poured a cup of tea for herself and Mu Hongyu. Finally, she sat down and treated the wound on her shoulder. The wound wasn't deep, but Mu Qinghe's current cultivation level was very high. The power contained in the sword couldn't be underestimated. The room was quiet. Mu Hongyu held the teacup and looked up at Chu Luiyue from time to time. Chu Luiyue looked calm. After treating the wound, she went to comb Dumpling's hair. Red Demon caught you? She asked. Tuanxi said, in a low voice. Chu Luiyue nodded and tied the red rope again. Mu Hongyu finally couldn't help but ask in a low voice. Lu Yu, you're not angry. Chapter 2398. Chu Luiyue paused for a moment, then picked up Dumpling. What are you angry about? Mu Hongyu mumbled. Just. Mu Qinghe lied to you, Chu Luiyue thought for a moment and laughed. I'm not the only one he's biased towards, right? Other than her, the people from the palace of the illusory god didn't seem to know much about his past. Everyone said that the first divine envoy had been in seclusion for several years, but it was obvious that this wasn't the case. He didn't spend those years in Tianling for nothing. Mu Hongyu looked at her. She was smiling, but no one could tell what she was feeling. Probably, anyone in her position would have complicated feelings at this moment, right? Mu Qinghe even attacked her. Chu Luiyue lowered her eyes slightly and paused for a moment before saying, when I first met him and found out his identity, I was indeed a little angry. But now... She seemed to have thought of something, and the corners of her lips curled up into a faint smile. The first divine envoy of the palace of the illusory god actually followed me respectfully for several years. Thinking about it, it's not too bad. Mu Hongyu couldn't smile. Dumpling lay in Chu Liuyue's arms, her two chubby little arms tightly wrapped around her neck. She was obviously in low spirits. "Ah, you," she muttered. "Hong Yao is actually still alive." Chu Liyue pinched her little face. "Yes, Hong Yao is still fine. And from what I see, it seems to have broken through to the 9th grade. We should be happy for it." In the past, when Dumpling was still a 9-colored heavenly pheasant, she gave Hong Yao a lot of anger because her grade was 1 grade higher than Hong Yao's. Therefore, Hong Yao had always wanted to break through to the 9th grade. Now, it had fulfilled its wish. Dumpling looked up at her. "But Hong Yao isn't happy." Chu Liyue fell silent. "Ah, you, I forgot to tell you before. Ever since I went to Fengming Mountain, I often felt a pair of eyes watching me from the shadows. I looked for him several times, but I couldn't find him. I even chased him all the way to the illusory god palace, but I still couldn't figure it out." Chu Liyue was stunned. "Are you talking about the first time I entered the palace of the illusory god?" "Yeah." Dumpling pouted. "I saw the shadow enter the residence of the first oracle. I knocked on the door for a long time, but they didn't open it for me. At that time, I was really angry, but..." Chu Liyue immediately understood. "That shadow is Red Demon." Dumpling nodded. "I didn't know it was Hong Yao until today when Hong Yao took the initiative to come here." "Hong Yao came to find you?" "Yes. If it wasn't for it, I wouldn't have known that you were in such danger in the illusionary god sea. Later, Hong Yao and I wanted to go out, but that oracle didn't agree no matter what. I said that I wanted to break the barrier, and he reluctantly agreed." Mu Hongyu shrunk her neck in silence. Break the barrier, only Dumpling could do such a thing. Chu Liyue was deep in thought. Hong Yao took the initiative to find Dumpling. Dumpling suddenly turned over and jumped down from Chu Liyue's arms. She hugged her arm and asked eagerly. "Ah, you, let's go and get Hong Yao back." "Okay." Chu Liyue sighed softly. "After all, it's Mu Qinghe's magical beast." Dumpling was indignant. "He's already the first oracle. What kind of divine beast can he want? Is Hong Yao, a 9th grade magical beast, still missing?" Chu Liyue's eyes flickered slightly. Puff! Hong Yao flew back to the courtyard and plunged into the pile of fallen leaves. Then, Mu Qinghe's figure slowly appeared in the courtyard. He didn't even look at Hong Yao. He walked straight to the room and said coldly, "From today onwards, you're not allowed to take half a step out of here." Hong Yao suddenly flew out of the leaves and arrived in front of Mu Qinghe. Mu Qinghe stopped in her tracks. The human and the beast looked at each other. Perhaps because it had just cried, Hong Yao's eyes were particularly clear. At this moment, there was still anger in its eyes that hadn't dissipated. Mu Qinghe's expression was cold and unmoved. After a long time, Hong Yao turned around and left. Mu Qinghe pushed the door open and entered. Qi Han stood outside the door and watched quietly. Finally, there was the sound of the door opening. He looked back and saw Mu Hongyu walking out of the room. Compared to the excitement she had when she came, she couldn't hide her disappointment and looked a little haggard. She couldn't be blamed for being like this. She had always thought that after breaking through to the Mahayana realm, she could successfully rescue Diwu Zhangze. Who knew that things would develop to this point? Mu Qinghe already knew their plan and would definitely guard him more strictly in the future. It would be extremely difficult to rescue Diwu Zhangze again. He was the first oracle. It was obvious that he was on the palace of the illusory god side. Thinking of this, Mu Hongyu suddenly gritted her teeth and quickened her pace to leave. "What did you say?" "The first oracle is Mu Qinghe." In the room, Jian Fengqi was shocked and almost suspected that he was hallucinating. He suddenly stood up. Did you see wrongly?" Mu Hongyu smiled coldly. He admitted it himself. How could he be mistaken? Jian Fengqi's mind went blank. He couldn't even speak. Mu Hongyu took a step forward and questioned him. Aren't you very close to him? Did you already know that he's the first oracle? Jian Fengqi felt extremely wronged. I really didn't know. His voice stopped abruptly. Mu Hongyu frowned. Just what? Jian Fengqi took a deep breath. I just met him by chance. We're not close, not close. Mu Hongyu stared at him. What did you say just now? Jian Fengqi felt a chill on his back. After a long time, he said helplessly. I really didn't know about this. Chapter 2399. Mu Hongyu looked at him suspiciously. Jian Fengqi raised his hand. I swear, this has nothing to do with me. Didn't you just say that the other oracles don't know about his past in Tianling? This proves that those things were basically arranged by him, don't you think so? Mu Hongyu thought about it carefully and gradually let go of her suspicions toward Jian Fengqi as she coldly snorted. Even if you didn't know about this, you didn't hear anything about his betrayal of Lu Yu. Jian Fengqi leaned back in his chair. If I had known, that wouldn't have happened. Even though he had been defeated by Chu Luyue for the past few years, he still respected her a lot in his heart. He knew that it was because of Chu Luyue that he could continuously improve his strength until today. It's just that, Jian Fengqi hesitated. Half a month before the incident, he had been in seclusion. I went to find him several times, but he refused to see me. At that time, I didn't care, but who knew, Mu Hongyu sneered. He planned this a long time ago, so it's not strange that this would happen. That's right. He planned this all along. Jian Fengqi tapped his hand on the armrest. I only realized this later on. I even think that even if Jiang Yuqing and Sheng Wanwan didn't exist, he would still do it. Mu Hongyu pursed her red lips. I know, he did it for the zither score. After all, she was the first oracle of the illusory god palace. Wasn't that easy to explain? Jian Fengqi asked. At that time, the zither score had already recognized her as its owner. If he really wanted it, he could have just taken her back to the illusory god palace. Why did he have to be so ruthless? Mu Hongyu was stunned. Moreover, don't forget, the princess has never really died. Why do you think he went through so much trouble? Dumpling was lying on her stomach on the bed. She rested her chin on her hands with a blank expression on her face. Furthermore, since he is the first divine envoy, why would he listen to Mo Shiqian? Mo Shiqian was the sixth oracle. Logically speaking, his status and power were far inferior to Mu Qinghe. But at that time, Mu Qinghe did suffer a lot from Mo Shiqian. That can't be fake. If he wanted to put on an act for you, he didn't have to do that. After all, he had already made a move on you. Since they had already shed all pretenses of cordiality, there was no need to put on such a boring show. There was really no need for that. Chu Luyue sat by the window with a chess board in front of him and a chess piece in his hand. Hearing Dumpling's words, her eyes flickered. In fact, she was also thinking about this problem. Unfortunately, Mo Shiqian was already dead. There was no chance to ask anything. The only person he could ask was Mu Qinghe. But she guessed that he wouldn't say anything. The wound on her shoulder was still aching, reminding her of everything that had happened before. The current Mu Qinghe was no longer the beggar she picked up from the streets. Or, everything was just a trap from the beginning. She laughed and put down the chess piece in her hand. Pa, the 11th and 12th oracle don't know about Mu Qinghe's past in Tianling. Then, it's normal that Mo Shiqian doesn't know. Judging from Mo Shurchin's reaction at that time, he definitely didn't know about Mu Qinghe's true identity. Dumpling suddenly understood. Ah, that's true. Then could it be that he doesn't know either? Chu Luiyue lowered her eyes and was silent for a long time before saying, I don't know either. She was full of doubts about everything about Mu Qinghe. She couldn't guess what was true and what was false, and she didn't want to guess. In short, he only has one identity now, the first oracle of the palace of the illusory god. Other than that, he might have long forgotten his past. Who would want to remember what he looked like when he was at his most embarrassing? Even if it was a disguise, for someone like the first oracle, he probably didn't want to leave any memories of those years when he bowed and groveled beside her. Tuanzi turned over and lay on her back on the bed. Her two short legs kicked here and there. I really want to find him and ask him about it. Oh. If it doesn't work, it's good to release Hong Yao. Chu Luiyue reminded her. Now that he has regained his identity, Hong Yao probably won't come again. In the past, when everyone didn't know the inside story, Hong Yao could still secretly go to Fengming Mountain to see Dumpling. But now, the naked truth was in front of them. The two sides were on opposite sides. It was definitely not convenient for Hong Yao to have any close contact with them anymore. Dumpling was angry and sad. How could this be? Chu Luiyue looked at the chessboard. Yes, how could this be? Dumpling stayed with Chu Luiyue for a day and then returned to Fengming Mountain. After experiencing this incident, she once again deeply felt that her strength was still not enough. Mu Qinghe had already become the first god's messenger and even injured Yu. She had to become more powerful as soon as possible. Chu Luiyue went out for a walk and found that no one knew what happened in the illusory god sea. Obviously, Mu Qinghe had suppressed the news. There was only 1 month left before the gate of heaven closed. The streets were deserted, but there were many more people on the star path. At the last moment, the Xian masters who felt that they still had some hope had already begun to take action. When Chu Luiyue walked by the star path and took a look, he had already determined the outcome of these people. Previously, Mu Yafeng did not succeed with Jin Yunlai's help, let alone these people. However, Chu Luiyue finally understood why Jin Yunlai could not help but help Mu Yafeng. This star path was indeed too difficult for these Xian masters. If not a single person succeeded, then his face would not look too good when the time came. In fact, Jin Yunlai had long seen that Chu Luiyue's talent was higher than Mu Yafeng's. If he could place his hope on Chu Luiyue, he probably would not have fallen to today's end. Unfortunately, because Chu Luiyue did not have a bloodline totem, he had always been biased and missed the last and only opportunity. Chu Luiyue returned to the previous courtyard. Just as she pushed the door open and entered, a handsome and charming face came into view. She was stunned. Rongxiu. Chapter 2400. Weren't you in seclusion? Is it over? Chu Luiyue asked in surprise. She had always thought that he still needed some time. Rongxiu nodded slightly. Then, his gaze fell on her shoulder, his expression slightly cold. Chu Luiyue subconsciously shrank her neck and confessed honestly. It's not serious. It's healed. The wound was relatively shallow. She had used medicine after returning. Now that she was a god, her recovery speed was amazing. She was almost healed by now. She didn't take the wound too seriously, but Rongxiu happened to come out of seclusion. With his sensitivity, it was basically impossible to hide it from him. So Chu Luiyue immediately chose to confess. Rongxiu reached out and pulled her back into the room. Sensing the low pressure from him, Chu Luiyue obediently quieted down. Her past experience told her that it was better to stay put at this time. After taking her back into the room, Rongxiu turned around and closed the door. Chu Luiyue whispered. It's really okay, I can see it myself. Rong Xiao said and turned to walk toward her. Chu Luiyue was stunned. You can see it yourself. What do you mean? Rong Xiao came to her and looked down at her. His face, which was always gentle and elegant, seemed to be covered in a light wind and snow, and there was a bit of biting coldness. I mean, I want to see it. His voice seemed to be lower than usual. Every word was like the wind plucking the strings of a zither, to enchant people's hearts. Do you want to do it yourself, or do you want me to help you? His tone didn't change, but there was a bit of strength in it that couldn't be refused. Chu Luiyue immediately said. I'll do it myself. Rong Xiao looked at her like this. The frost between his eyebrows finally melted, and a faint smile flashed across his crimson lips. You can do it yourself. Maybe you're not as fast as me. Chu Luiyue's face was slightly hot. She glared at him angrily, then took off her coat, revealing her injured shoulder. A half-inch long sword wound on her snow-white, round shoulder had healed and formed a scab, with a faint layer of powder. Rong Xiao's brows slightly furrowed, and there seemed to be billowing waves in his eyes. He reached out his hand, and his warm fingertips gently landed on it. Does it hurt? Chu Luiyue shook her head. It doesn't hurt. This small injury was nothing compared to the injuries she had suffered in the past. Rong Xiao's thin lips slightly pursed. Whose? Chu Luiyue paused, and her lips curved up into a light smile. Ts. Yytststes, T, S her, S, STT, you, you don't have to smile if you don't want to. Chu Luiyue's slender, white hand gently grasped the clothes in front of his chest. Her lips curled up a little, but in the end, she still let go. She took a few steps back and gently rested her head on his chest. The familiar cold fragrance instantly wrapped her up, making her feel extremely at ease. She closed her eyes for a long time, then sighed softly. She and Mu Hongyu said that they weren't angry, but how could they say that they didn't mind at all? But things had changed with the passage of time. Things remained the same, but people had changed. If she still held on to those things, it seemed to be particularly embarrassing. But Rong Xiao had seen her in the most embarrassing state. So, only when she was with him, she could truly let go of everything in her heart and face everything with her true self. She shook her head. Originally, she had a lot of things to say, but after hearing Rong Xiao's words and being held in his arms, she felt that there was nothing to care about. He knew what she was thinking and understood all her unspoken feelings. He knew the pain in her heart and was willing to soothe all her wounds. She hugged his lean waist and said softly. Rong Xiao. Fortunately, I have you. He wouldn't lie to her, hide from her, and always be by her side. At this moment, she was resting her head on his chest, so she didn't see the golden and dark flames that instantly rose in his eyes. But it was only for a moment, and the flames dissipated instantly. Rong Xiao pinched her chin and kissed her. Yanqing walked out of the room and headed in a certain direction. He had just walked a short distance when he was stopped by someone. Lord Yanqing, where are you going? He stopped and turned his head to look. Little Hachi was leaning lazily against the door, looking like she had just woken up. There was still some tiredness in her eyes. She squinted slightly and looked over with a faint smile, which made her even more charming. Her usually soft voice was a little hoarse at this moment. Perhaps even she herself didn't know how seductive she was at this moment. Yanqing's gaze lingered on her face for a moment. It's a private matter. How is it a private matter? I think you're going to look for His Highness Saint, right? Little Hachi chuckled and raised her chin. I advise you not to go now. Yanqing frowned slightly. Why? Little Hachi's smile deepened. Because Master is also here. Qing was stunned and immediately understood. He really didn't know about this. Thank you for your reminder, little Hachi. I'll wait then. Little Hachi waved her hand lazily. Don't wait. I've already woken up from my afternoon nap, and I haven't seen anyone yet. Qing, little Hachi's words were straightforward and ambiguous, and he didn't know how to respond for a moment. Fortunately, he usually didn't talk much, so little Hachi didn't mind. She suddenly thought of something and curved her lips into a smile. It just so happens that I'm going to Herb Mountain. Lord Qing, do you want to come along? Qing chose to reject almost immediately. I'm afraid it's not convenient. Little Hachi blinked. Why is it inconvenient? When we come back, you'll probably be able to see His Highness, and I'll also be able to see my master. Isn't that great? Besides, she rolled her eyes and spread her hands helplessly. Besides, many people haven't seen you before, and they all think that I'm lying to them. Recently, some people have come looking for you. It's really annoying. Qing slowly tightened his grip on the sword. Who? Chapter 2401. Little Hachi stretched lazily, revealing her slender waist. The strings of colorful jade beads on the hem of her blouse jingled and swayed gently, which was particularly eye-catching. Then how can I remember, she dragged her voice slightly, looking innocent and charming. In her eyes, those people all looked the same. She couldn't tell if they were good or bad. Qing pursed his thin lips slightly and relaxed his hand slightly. Little Hachi saw that he didn't speak, so she shrugged and said softly, well, since Lord Qing doesn't want to go, then, let's go. Qing said. His expression was as usual, and no emotion could be seen. As long as they didn't run into those people, it should be fine. Little Hachi showed a bright smile on her face. Okay. She walked to Qing with small steps. A gust of fragrant wind also followed. Then let's go. Qing didn't move. His eyes fell on her face. Because she had just taken a nap, her face was still a little red. Her black hair was slightly messy, and a few strands hung down and wandered around her neck. She was born extremely beautiful, enchanting and charming. At this time, there was a hint of laziness. Her every move was even more seductive. She was like a gust of wind, quietly stirring up a pool of spring water. Little Hachi took a step forward. Seeing that Qing didn't follow, she came to see him. Lord Qing, what's wrong? She touched her face. Was there something dirty on her face? Qing paused and said, your hair is messy. Little Hachi was stunned. Her beautiful eyes blinked, and then she took Qing's arm with one hand. Qing frowned slightly. What's wrong? Little Hachi couldn't pull him away, so she pulled his hand aside and moved closer. Let me see. Qing looked down and found that little Hachi was staring at the sword in his arms. This sword was bright and sharp, and it clearly reflected her face. It turned out that she used it as a mirror, Qing understood. For a moment, he didn't know whether to move or not, so he just stood there. Little Eight leaned forward slightly and carefully looked at his own reflection on the sword. He murmured softly, that's right, Little Eight. It's a little messy. She moved closer, and the strands of hair moved with the wind, gently brushed the back of Qing's hand, and gave him a strange itch. Itch. His hand slowly tightened, and a few veins could be seen on his thin and powerful palm. Little Eight took out a dangling hairpin and hooked the few strands of hair, gently wrapping it around the hairpin before inserting it into the hair. Although it was crooked, it gave off a sense of laziness and casualness. Little Eight always knew how to tidy himself up in the most beautiful way possible. Is this all right? Little Hachi looked up and tilted her head at Qing. As she moved, the hair ornament swayed gently. It was particularly moving next to her delicate, white, and almost translucent earlobes. At this time, the tiredness between her eyebrows had dissipated, and the faint redness on her cheeks had faded a lot. Only his eyes were still shining brightly. Yenqing's heart seemed to be hit by something. He met her eyes. She was beautiful, charming, and pure. Yenqing suddenly had a thought: I shouldn't go out. If she went out like this, she would definitely be seen by many people. But he quickly came back to his senses. Realizing the thought that flashed through his mind, he pressed his thin lips tightly, and his heart beat fiercely. How could he think like this? Little Hachi was beautiful and charming, and she liked crowds. What's more, she was going to the herb mountain to do something. He really shouldn't have such a thought. Seeing that Yenqing didn't speak for a long time, and even frowned slightly, little Hachi was confused. Don't I look good like this? That was impossible. Her sense of beauty had never been wrong. This was clearly very good. Knowing that Yenqing was indifferent, little Hachi didn't expect any praise from this iceberg. But he couldn't be unable to tell what was good looking, right? Yenqing came back to his senses and looked at her. He paused for a moment and finally said, "You look good. Extremely good looking." Little Hachi snorted softly. After all this time, it was just these two words. Wasn't this Lord Yenqing a little too stingy with his words? But it didn't seem to be fun to argue with him. Little Hachi reluctantly accepted this praise. After all, she still needed his help. That's good. Her lips curved, and then she turned to go out. Suddenly, a broad and strong hand grasped her hand. Little Hachi was stunned. She turned around and looked at Yenqing in surprise. To be precise, she looked at the two's tightly clasped hands. "Sir Yenqing, why are you holding my hand?" Yenqing's expression was as calm and self-controlled as ever. Hearing this, he frowned slightly. "Aren't we going to the herb mountain to show them?" After a pause, he let go of her hand. "If I offended you, please forgive me, little Hachi." Little Hachi clicked her tongue and gave him a thumbs up. "Sir Yenqing, I find that you're getting more and more tactful." He understood the principle of putting on a show to the fullest extent. She didn't think of it just now. Thinking of this, she stepped forward and directly took Yenqing's arm. Half of her body was pressed against his. Her soft and tender hand gently grasped Yenqing's hand. "Then let's go, brother Yenqing." The two of them walked out of the door hand in hand. As soon as they came out, they bumped into Wu Yao, who had just returned from the heavenly gate. Little Hachi, Yenqing, are you two going out to play together?" Little Hachi was embarrassed. She didn't have time to explain to fifth brother and the others previously, but in the blink of an eye, they bumped into each other again. What else could she say? Most importantly, they were outside now. Thus, she could only choose to nod. Wu Yao looked at the two of them holding hands and snorted softly. Although Yenqing was barely qualified in all aspects, Wu Yao still felt indignant when he saw his sister so intimately with him. Go and come back early. With that, Wu Yao didn't stay any longer and returned to the courtyard. Little Hachi coughed and hurriedly ran away with Yenqing. Wu Yao returned to the courtyard and saw Yi standing in front of the door. "Big brother, did you see little Hachi and Yenqing go out together just now?" Yi nodded. This Yenqing really hid his strength well. He abducted our little Hachi so easily. Wu Yao walked over to the stone table and poured himself a cup of tea. "Go to the fire." Yi glanced at him and said mildly. "He's marrying into the family." Pfft. Wu Yao spat out a mouthful of tea. He looked at Yi in shock. Then, this shock gradually turned into admiration. No wonder Big Brother didn't have any reaction earlier. So he was waiting here. Marrying into the family. Will His Highness the Holy Sun agree? Enchanting was that person's right-hand man. An extremely faint smile flashed through Tinyi's indifferent and narrow eyes, disappearing in an instant. Of course. Chapter 2402. Herb Mountain. There was still a month before the gate of heaven closed. Everyone in the Illusion God Palace was on high alert. People were coming and going on Herb Mountain. It was very lively. Little Hachi and Enchanting attracted a lot of attention the moment they arrived. Countless pairs of eyes looked in their direction. When they saw that little Hachi was holding a man's hand, almost everyone was shocked. Who is that? Why is he so intimate with little Hachi? I don't know him. He seems to be new. Is he the one she mentioned before? Her sweetheart. Is there really one? That man seems to be Her Eminence. He's so young. All kinds of discussions could be heard. Little Hachi was very satisfied. She pulled Enchanting's hand. Enchanting immediately understood and bowed slightly. Little Hachi moved closer to his ear and laughed softly. Brother Enchanting, look, you're really something. As she spoke, her warm breath fell on his ears and neck, making him feel scalding hot. Enchanting's Adam's apple bobbed, but he didn't say anything. Little Hachi didn't expect him to say anything. After all, she was in charge of praising people. Let's go over there. There are a few kinds of herbs that need to be collected. Little Hachi was indeed very close to him. When she spoke, Enchanting could even feel her soft lips brushing against his. He nodded slightly. Okay. Little Hachi smiled. Big brother Enchanting looks like he's so well behaved. She suddenly wanted to pinch his face and see if the iceberg would melt. Little Hachi hesitated for a moment, but in the end, she held back and pulled him towards a mountain peak. Now, she was very familiar with this place. She clearly remembered where the medicinal herbs were located and how much they were. So she could find whatever she wanted immediately. Enchanting followed her obediently. The voices of the two were very soft, and the bystanders could hardly hear them. Therefore, this interaction of whispering was an extremely intimate display of affection in the eyes of the bystanders. Many young men were heartbroken. Looks like little Hachi really likes that person. She's actually willing to be so close to him. That man doesn't look ordinary either. No wonder she was willing to reject Lianghe for him. Forget it, forget it. Let's worry more about ourselves. There's not much time left. Xu Jing stood by the stream and frowned slightly as he looked at the boundary not far ahead. Recently, this barrier had been very unstable, appearing and disappearing from time to time. Even she could not grasp it. Although she had never been able to fully control this barrier, such a situation had never occurred before. The attitude of the first and second oracles was very clear. They wanted her to solve it herself. But, it was easy to say, but extremely difficult to do. In these 10,000 years, she had thought of countless ways, but she still couldn't do anything about this barrier. Now that there was only a short month left, what should she do? Xu Jing was very frustrated. But she also knew that this was her last chance. So many things had happened before, and her position was already in danger. If she continued to be in this state, Xu Jing didn't dare to think further. Suddenly, a few voices of discussion came from afar. Are you serious? Little Hachi really came with a man. Of course it's true. Everyone saw it with their own eyes. And the two of them are very close. Everyone can see that the two of them are a couple. I remember that the man is called Enchanting. I heard that he has the same name as the divine general of the left by the emperor's side. I took a look from afar just now. That person is indeed a venerable god expert, and he's extremely young. It can be said that he has a bright future. Ordinary people really can't compare to him. Standing beside little Hachi, they are indeed very compatible. Xu Jing frowned and looked up. The people who were talking were just passing by and didn't come close. But when they spoke, they didn't deliberately lower their voices, so even though they were still some distance away, Xu Jing could still hear them very clearly. Now, whenever she heard little Hachi's name, she would be very annoyed. Previously, due to that person's words, Xu Jing had been holding back and didn't find trouble with little Hachi. But now, she had delivered herself to her door and even dared to show off with that person with the same name. This was too much. Xu Jing's face turned cold, and she walked toward the rolling mountains ahead. Little Hachi was standing in front of a swamp with Yenqing. Above the swamp, white reeds that were as tall as a person fluttered in the wind. Little Hachi stood by the shore and suddenly sighed. Sigh. I miss Shifang so much. Yenqing looked at her. What's wrong? Little Hachi raised her hand and pointed forward. The celestial vine is buried below. I have to go down and dig it out myself. In the past, it was Shifang who did this. In fact, it wasn't that little Hachi hadn't done this kind of thing before. After all, when she was in Peach Blossom Dock, she and Shifang were in a mess in order to process all the medicinal herbs. However, if there was a second choice, little Hachi would still try her best to avoid it. In the past, Shifang was her second choice. But now, she looked at Yenqing. Yenqing immediately understood what she meant. I'll help you. Little Hachi immediately acted coquettishly. Brother Yenqing is the best. Yenqing didn't say anything and turned to walk into the depths of the reed marsh. At this moment, a mocking voice sounded. You even have to trouble others for such a small matter. Do you deserve to be called a celestial physician? Yenqing stopped in his tracks and frowned. Little Hachi turned around. Sigh, why is it this person again? Eighth Oracle, are you waiting for me every day? Otherwise, why do I run into you everywhere? Xu Jing smiled coldly and his eyes fell on Yenqing. Just as he was about to mock him, his expression suddenly changed. This back view. When Chu Luyue woke up, it was already evening. The sky was getting dark. She opened her eyes in a daze and felt sore all over, as if her bones were falling apart. For some reason, Rongxiu seemed to be especially, as soon as she moved, a warm body pressed against her from behind. Rongxiu's arm wrapped around her waist and easily pulled her into his arms. Chu Luyue propped her hands on his chest, opened her eyes, and shook her head pitifully. Rongxiu chuckled and kissed her. I won't bully you. Chu Luyue was slightly relieved and couldn't help but say, You've already bullied me before saying this. You're too insincere. His voice, which had always been clear, was now a little hoarse. Rongxiu's eyes deepened and his thin lips curved slightly. How do you know that it's over and that I didn't stop out of kindness? Chu Luyue suddenly blushed. This man, however, Rongxiu was a man of his words. After being intimate for a while, he carried her and got up to take a bath. However, he didn't stay for too long and went out. After Chu Luyue cleaned up and returned to the bedroom, she found that Rongxiu had already sat down. There was a chess game in front of him. When he heard the sound, he looked up. The bright light reflected in the depths of his eyes that were as deep as the sea. Come. Digression, 6:00 in the evening. The closest comment to the truth appeared in the comment section. I'm also a little surprised. Chapter 2403. Chu Luyue walked over and sat down opposite Rongxiu. Why do you suddenly want to play chess? Rongxiu smiled. Nothing. We haven't fought since you cracked all the Xian formations on the Star Road. Shall we have a game? Chu Luiyue was suddenly interested. Sure. It had been a long time since the two of them had fought together. Now, she had finished the Star Road, and Rongxiu had just finished his closed-door training. It was a good opportunity. Rongxiu said, I won't hold back this time. Chu Luiyue raised her eyebrows slightly. You always said that before. Rongxiu's strength was unfathomable. Every time she thought she was about to catch up with him, she would find that he was more powerful than she thought. Then she had to continue to catch up. Rongxiu's eyes drooped slightly, as if he had recalled many things in the past with her words. His thin lips curled slightly, and his voice was low and gentle. This time, I won't lie to you. After that, he waved his sleeves, and his slender hand brushed over the chessboard in front of him. A majestic and astonishing pressure descended, and the chessboard was instantly annihilated into powder. Chu Luiyue was stunned, and then her heart skipped a beat. Rongxiu was going to fight with divine power in this game. He hadn't even made a move, and the chessboard carved with the best rainflower gold stone was silently destroyed just like that. Then, a ball of brilliant golden light flew out from Rongxiu's palm, and divided into several crisscrossing lines in the air. A new chessboard formed with tyrannical divine power appeared in front of Chu Luiyue. The flowing light was dazzling and brilliant. The chessboard was just quietly suspended in the air, but Chu Luiyue had already felt an oppressive pressure. Her heart trembled. Rongxiu's current strength was probably far beyond her expectations. You first. Rongxiu said. Chu Luiyue gently nodded. With a flick of his finger, a stream of reddish gold light flew out. However, before this stream of light could condense into a chess piece on the chessboard, it was silently killed by the brilliant golden chessboard. Chu Luiyue's pupils shrank. She knew that Rongxiu intended to spar, so although she did not use her full strength, she still used half of her strength. Unexpectedly, he couldn't even get close to the chessboard. She lifted her gaze slightly and glanced at Rongxiu. There was a faint smile on his lips. I've already said that I won't hold back this time. Chu Luiyue narrowed his eyes. He made up his mind and attacked again. Poof! A force much more tyrannical than before suddenly flew out, and after a short and fierce battle with the force on the chessboard, it finally landed. With this, Chu Luiyue finally succeeded in taking this step. However, Chu Luiyue subconsciously sat up straight. Her shoulders were ramrod straight, and she held her breath in concentration. At this moment, she finally understood the meaning of Rongxiu's words. He was serious. This was only the first step, and it was already so difficult. One could imagine that there would be an extremely fierce battle after this. Thinking of this, Chu Luiyue's heart raced a few times. Amidst her nervousness, there was also some excitement. That was the strong desire to battle that would only arise when facing a strong opponent. Rongxiu looked at her and saw the faint brilliance in her eyes. It's your turn. Chu Luiyue raised her chin. Rongxiu raised his hand, and a stream of black light gushed out from his fingertip. Then, he lightly tapped forward. Poof! A pitch-black chess piece fell to the ground in response to the sound. Due to the shocking impact of this energy, a circle of ripples appeared on the chessboard. Chu Luiyue looked at the chess piece in shock. An extremely familiar feeling emanated from it. This power, this aura, she had clearly seen it before. After a short silence, she suddenly thought of something and looked up at Rongxiu in front of her. First Master. Back in country Yao Chen's Imperial Mausoleum, she had met a man. She had never seen his face, but she knew that his force was an extremely special black. After that, she had gone to Jinbao Pavilion several times to meet this rumored First Master, but to no avail. Gradually, she put these thoughts aside. But now, Rong Xiu looked at her. His almond-shaped eyes were clear and deep. She had always been extremely intelligent and understood everything at once. He chuckled and said, "That's right. When I gave you the Black Pyramid back then, I told you that it belonged to my wife." Chu Liuyue's heart instantly surged with tempestuous waves. He admitted it. That's right, the Black Pyramid sealed her memories in the Divine Ruins world, so it naturally belonged to her. Wife, so the wife he mentioned back then was herself. Chu Liuyue's lips moved slightly. Countless scenes flashed through her mind, and it was incomparably chaotic. She had too many things to say and too many questions to ask, but now, facing Rong Xiu, she suddenly couldn't say a word. It was as if something was stuck in her throat, and she couldn't move it. She realized that she seemed to have overlooked many important things, but for a moment, she couldn't distinguish them. This news was too shocking for her, and it caused her mind to be in a mess. After a long time, she finally thought of something and muttered softly, "That's right. The Holy Son of the Yuntian Tower originally had 2 divine bodies. This also meant that Rong Xiu had 2 divine powers in his body at the same time." In fact, it wasn't that Chu Liyue didn't have any doubts in her heart. However, because the power and aura of the Great Master were very unfamiliar and very different from Rong Xiu's, she quickly rejected this guess and didn't think too much about it afterward. Who knew? Looking at the black chess piece on the chessboard, Chu Liyue's lips moved and finally asked. "So, you were the one who specially placed my remnant soul and memories in the Imperial tomb of Yaoqin." This was the only way to explain everything that had happened before. Rong Xiu's phoenix eyes were deep. "After this game, I will tell you the answer." Herb Mountain. The figure quickly disappeared into the reeds. Xu Jing's heart was beating wildly. He immediately stepped forward and said, "Wait." That figure was really similar. A hand suddenly stretched out from the side and blocked in front of Xu Jing. Little Hachi raised her eyebrows slightly and looked at Xu Jing with a faint smile. "Eighth Oracle, what are you doing?" "Brother Yan Qing is helping me find the cactus vine." "Why are you calling him?" Little Hachi asked while looking at Xu Jing. Something was wrong. Xu Jing's current expression and mood were very strange. She had dealt with Xu Jing many times, but she had never seen her behave like this. More importantly, Xu Jing was obviously acting like this after seeing Yan Qing. What was she doing? Was she angry? Angry? No. Xu Jing's eyes clearly showed that she was looking at a very familiar person. At this moment, Xu Jing was anxious in her heart. When she heard Little Eight shout out those words, she was even more enraged. He slapped Little Hachi's hand away and scolded coldly, "I don't want to argue with you today. If you know what's good for you, behave yourself." Chapter 2404. The smile on Little Hachi's face faded. She moved her wrist and chuckled. "What a coincidence. I don't want to slap the 8th Oracle today. The skin on your face is too rough. What if you cut my hand?" "You." No one could tolerate such words. Even Xu Jing, who had a grudge with Little Eight for a long time, was no exception. But she was more concerned about something else. She looked up at the reeds again, but the figure had completely disappeared. Little Hachi's mood became unpleasant when she saw her like this. "Eighth Oracle, why are you staring at our brother Yan Qing?" This gaze, it really made her uncomfortable. Xu Jing's eyes were cold, and she was about to attack. She. A long sword suddenly flew out from the depths of the reeds and went straight for Xu Jing. Xu Jing was startled and immediately withdrew her hand. She moved her feet and retreated a few steps. Only then was she able to avoid the sword. She looked at the sword in surprise and doubt. It was just a very ordinary sword, but the power contained in it was extremely shocking. What exactly? Little 8 turned around to take a look, the corners of his lips raised slightly. There was one thing she had to admit. Enchanting was a person of few words and was as cold as an iceberg all day long, but her fighting ability was really amazing. Just like now, even if she was not in front of her, her attacks were steady and accurate. With someone supporting her, little Hachi felt even more elated. 8th Oracle, whether I'm worthy of being called a celestial physician is not up to you alone. Besides, I'm not troubling others. Brother Enchanting is my man. Not to mention helping me pick the celestial vine, even if he helps me massage my shoulders, back, hair, and makeup, it's his duty. This is called fun. Do you know what fun is? As little Hachi spoke, she kicked the shoes on her feet. She thought to herself, this is good. Enchanting even helped me put on my shoes. Wouldn't it infuriate the 8th Oracle to death if he were to say it out loud? Shu Jing was so angry that her entire body was trembling. Of course you. Before he could finish, a buzzing sound suddenly came from behind Shu Jing. Startled, she hurriedly turned around to look. In the distance, a faint cyan barrier was faintly discernible. Several streams of light swam on it, shining brightly. At this time, the sky was already very dark, and the barrier was particularly eye-catching. Sensing the fluctuations coming from the barrier, Shu Jing frowned. Why did it start again? But she had no choice. She had to go there immediately. Otherwise, it would be troublesome if something happened. She glanced at little Hachi unwillingly, her eyes quickly sweeping over the reeds behind her. Although the possibility was very small, she still felt an inexplicable uneasiness in her heart. He probably wouldn't be able to see him today, so he could only look for another opportunity. In any case, this person was in the illusory god palace. What was so difficult about meeting him? Thinking of this, Shu Jing no longer hesitated and turned around to leave. Little Hachi's beautiful eyes narrowed slightly as she looked at the barrier thoughtfully. A breeze blew over, lifting up the tongue tied to her waist. At this time, a sound came from behind her. Little Hachi turned around and saw Enchanting walking out of the reeds. He was holding a few cactus vines in his hand. Then, he raised his hand, and the sword finally flew back into his hand. He came in front of little Hachi and handed the cactus vines to her. Although it grew in the swamp, the cactus vines were green all over and as clear as jade. They were very clean and beautiful. Thank you, big brother Enchanting. Little Hachi took the cactus vines and smiled at Enchanting. Enchanting's expression changed slightly. That person just now was the 8th Oracle? Little 8 nodded. Then, his eyes turned. He bit his lips and leaned over with a smile. Big brother Enchanting, the 8th Oracle, seems to be interested in you. Impossible. Enchanting blurted out without thinking. Little Hachi refuted. How do you know it's impossible? If I didn't stop her, she would have gone in to find you. She looked really strange. Although little Hachi's words were teasing, they weren't completely nonsense. Enchanting pursed his thin lips and said. I mean, she hasn't even seen me. What else can she say? Little Hachi snorted. That's hard to say. The 8th Oracle is very strange. Also, she seems to have a special feeling for the Divine General of the Left. Ah! She suddenly exclaimed. She can't be a couple with that person, right? She thought about how Shu Jing forced Enchanting to change his name. If there wasn't something going on, why would she care so much about it? It was rare for Enchanting to frown. What nonsense are you talking about? I'm not talking nonsense. Little Hachi's red lips curled. You didn't see how protective she was of the Divine General of the Left that day. Both their words and expressions were very intimate. What if there is something going on between them? If I offend her, won't I offend the divine general of the left as well? Yan Qing looked at her. You're still worried about this? If she was afraid, she wouldn't have slapped Xu Jing. Little Hachi glared at him. Of course I'm afraid. I heard that the divine general of the left is very powerful. If he comes to find trouble with me. He won't. Yan Qing interrupted her. Little Hachi snorted. Who knows? Speaking of this, she suddenly looked at Yan Qing and asked. Who is prettier, me or Xu Jing? Yan Qing paused. Little Hachi pushed him gently. Tell me. Yan Qing said concisely. You. Only then did Little Eight smile again as he gently touched his face. I think so too. Then I'm relieved. I'm so beautiful. Do you think the divine general of the left would be willing to lay his hands on me? Yan Qing looked at her for a long time before he said. He wouldn't. Digression, there was no fifth update today. Once the weather became hot, the skin on her hands began to peel. It hurt to type. When she wrote the third update, she felt that she had taken a step toward the ending. She was a little reluctant. She even wanted Rong Xiu to continue to hide the truth. But the truth would come out eventually. The author didn't say so much because she wanted to be lazy. No. Humph. Asterisk, asterisk, caret asterisk, asterisk. Chapter 2405. Time passed slowly. In the room, Chu Luyue and Rong Xiu sat opposite each other. Between the two of them was a chessboard. On it, the two extremely intense colors of black and red gold complemented each other, forming an extremely gorgeous painting. Fine beads of sweat gradually appeared on Chu Luyue's forehead, wetting a few strands of hair on her forehead. 6 hours had passed, but in this period of time, she had only taken 5 steps. It was not that she did not know where to place a piece, but the power on the chessboard was simply too strong. If she wanted to successfully place a piece, she had to put in a lot of effort. Moreover, every step was more difficult than the previous one. Before this, Chu Luyue had never thought that this game of chess between her and Rong Xiu would progress so slowly and painfully. Chu Luyue had long known that Rong Xiu was very strong, but this was the first time she clearly felt the gap between the two of them. It was like a natural chasm that was difficult to cross. After she placed her 6th piece, Rong Xiu raised his hand as well. A black chess piece landed gracefully. His movements were natural and smooth, and there was no sense of oppression that Chu Luyue felt when she faced the chessboard. It was as if everything was just a piece of cake for him. In fact, it was indeed so. Chu Luyue pursed her lips. She was now a god, and it was no exaggeration to say that she was definitely one of the best among the gods. Her divine power was definitely at a level that could crush most of the cultivators. Needless to say, she had already completed the star path and deciphered all the Xian formations on it. Great Grandmaster, in front of Rong Xiu, she was beaten to a pulp. Chu Luyue held her breath and concentrated. She had to finish this game, and then, listen to Rong Xiu tell her the answer that he had been hiding for a long time. Chang Wanzhou stood in the courtyard and looked at the door in front of him. His brows were slightly furrowed, and there was a trace of worry on his beautiful and delicate face. It had been a long time since those two had entered. Now, not only did they not show any signs of coming out, there was even a faint pressure coming from the entire room. It was Rong Xiu's handiwork. He had set up such a terrifying barrier that easily blocked everything inside. What exactly? After a moment of hesitation, he walked towards another room. The door was not locked, but Chang Wanzhou came to the door and knocked. It's me. An indifferent and calm voice came from the room. Come in. Only then did Chang Wanzhou enter. Walking around the screen, Xin Yi was standing behind the desk. There was a picture in front of him. Chang Wanzhou glanced at it subconsciously. He could only vaguely see the complicated lines drawn on it. Amidst the chaos, there seemed to be some kind of indescribable pattern. When he saw the familiar blurry handwriting hidden under the lines, his heart skipped a beat and he immediately lowered his head. Sun Yi did not seem to mind. He only took a paperweight and casually pressed it down. Then, he looked up. Is something the matter? Chang Wanzhou hesitated for a moment. Master and His Highness, there seems to be something wrong. It would be fine if it was just a day or two, but for them to not come out, coupled with His Highness's actions, it was truly unsettling. Sun Yi shook his head. Master is with His Highness. There's no need to worry. Chang Wanzhou wanted to say something, but hesitated. After thinking for a while, he said, there's less than a month left before the Heaven Gate closes. A storm was coming. The current Illusion God Palace was much quieter than before, and the atmosphere was much more tense. Clearly, everyone was waiting for that day to come. Sun Yi's expression did not change as he nodded. It's indeed soon. Master and His Highness have their own plans. There's no need for us to worry. As for you, how have you been? Chang Wanzhou rubbed his forehead. Everything is going well. Sun Yi didn't seem surprised. Ever since the seal was removed, Chang Wanzhou had completely absorbed the evil frost energy in his body, and he had broken through to the Supreme God realm. To the current Chang Wanzhou, cultivation was an extremely simple matter. As long as nothing went wrong, there was nothing to worry about. It's fine as long as you know what you're doing. However, don't go out during this period of time. Just stay here and cultivate. Yes. Chang Wanzhou replied. Then, he thought of something and pursed his lips. I heard that when the Heaven Gate closes, all the divine envoys will appear. At that time, the first divine envoy of the Illusion God Palace should also. He's already out. Sun Yi lowered his head and looked at the picture in front of him. Chang Wanzhou was shocked. What? Then why isn't there any news outside? He had been keeping an eye out for news during this period of time, but he didn't hear any related rumors. Sun Yi's lips curled into an extremely faint smile. There seemed to be a dark glint in the depths of his narrow and indifferent eyes. He went to the Illusion God Sea. You naturally don't know. Chang Wanzhou immediately understood, but when he heard the words, Illusion God Sea, he looked at Sun Yi hesitantly. Then, when do you plan to go? Sun Yi paused, but he didn't answer his question. Is Shijing still in the lightning pool? Chang Wanzhou nodded. He used to come back every day, but since 3 days ago, he has been staying there and hasn't come back. It's only right, Sun Yi said. Chang Wanzhou didn't reply. After a while, Sun Yi said, go back and rest. You don't have to worry about these things. There might be a lot of things waiting for you to do in the future. Chang Wanzhou's eyes flickered. He touched the Tuanshinzi at his waist and said, all right. Yes. Xu Jing quickly returned and came in front of the light blue barrier again with a frown. The abnormal fluctuation just now had dissipated. It was as if nothing had happened. But, she clearly knew that it wasn't the case. Xu Jing was in a terrible mood. This barrier was unpredictable and would have problems from time to time. It always made her feel like she was being toyed with. She became even more frustrated when she thought of the attitude of the first and second divine emissaries. Now, she had to admit that she couldn't solve this problem with her own strength. Thinking of this, she made up her mind and turned to leave. Not only this barrier, but also the divine general of the left, even though she felt that it was impossible, she still wanted to confirm it herself. Yu Qian was on Divine Beast Mountain. This was the first time he went out since he was publicly punished by the first divine emissary. The divine beasts on the mountain seemed to have sensed his cold mood and didn't dare to approach him. Yu Qian walked alone in the forest. As he walked, he thought about some things that had happened recently. He was a bit angry and unwilling to accept the first divine emissary. No matter what, he was still the second divine emissary. Although his status was slightly lower than the first divine emissary, how could Yu Qian not have any complaints after kneeling in public for 3 days and 3 nights? These years, the first divine emissary didn't do anything. He personally took care of all the affairs of the illusion god palace. But now, he was punished like this just because he asked one more question. Yu Qian's eyes darkened. Chapter 2406. But Yu Qian didn't dare to show it. He knew very well that the strength of the first divine envoy was much higher than his. More importantly, the first divine envoy was the most valued and trusted person of the divine master. He had the support of the divine master. This alone was something that others couldn't compare to. Therefore, Yu Qian could only endure. Suddenly, his expression froze as he looked ahead. "Who is it?" he shouted sternly. A tall figure walked out of the forest. It was a young man with a strong and tall figure. He was even half a head taller than Yu Qian. He had a strong appearance and an outstanding temperament. It was an unfamiliar face. After seeing Yu Qian, the man in front of him was stunned for a moment before he nodded and saluted. "Greetings, second divine envoy." Yu Qian's strength was extraordinary, and there was only one possibility that he would appear in this place at this time. Yu Qian quickly searched his mind and vaguely guessed the other party's name. Hua Shuangshuang. Hua Shuangshuang was a little surprised. "Do you know me, second divine envoy?" Yu Qian couldn't say that he knew him, but he had indeed heard of his name. Ever since Chu Luo successfully completed the star path and entered the palace of the illusory god, Yu Qian had specially investigated her subordinates. Hua Shuangshuang was very tall and very recognizable, so Yu Qian quickly guessed. "What are you doing here?" Yu Qian asked coldly. The heavenly gate was about to close. Now, most cultivators were busy improving their strength. Why would they stay on the Divine Beast Mountain? Hua Shuangshuang was about to speak when a small head quickly appeared behind her and quickly shrank back. Yu Qian's eyes were very sharp. "What's that behind you?" Hua Shuangshuang coughed. "It's nothing. It's just a little guy." "Little guy," Yu Qian suddenly laughed. "Wind-stepping tiger." Hua Shuangshuang's heart skipped a beat. Yu Qian's eyes were extremely sharp. Even if it was just a glance, he quickly recognized that it was a small wind-striding tiger. However, there didn't seem to be such a beast on the Divine Beast Mountain. And where did the one on Hua Shuangshuang's back come from? Yu Qian could clearly sense a familiar aura coming from the little wind-stepping tiger. After thinking for a while, he suddenly thought of something. Is this the cub left behind by that animal? When he was bitten by the wind-striding tiger, he was extremely angry and killed it in a fit of anger. However, he did not expect that there would be a small one left behind. And now, it was following Hua Shuangshuang. Yu Qian stretched out his hand. "Give it to me." Hua Shuangshuang didn't move. He knew all too well what the Yu Qian wanted to do. The little thing was lying on his back. It seemed to have sensed the dangerous aura coming from Yu Qian and was trembling. This caused the smile on Hua Shuangshuang's face to fade. Second Divine Envoy, it has no one to rely on and is already very pitiful. Why do you have to kill it? Yu Qian seemed to have heard a joke. It seems that you know quite a lot. But, who are you to speak to me like this? Hua Shuangshuang did not seem to sense the threat in his words and said indifferently, "I know that you are in charge of the Divine Beast Mountain, but, because of this, there are some things that are most inappropriate for you to do, right? There were so many divine beasts here, and they all obeyed Yu Qian's words. However, it was obvious that it was more because of fear. Just a moment ago, he was playing with the little guy. When the Yu Qian came, the other divine beasts immediately scattered in panic. It was not hard to imagine how the Yu Qian usually treated them. But then again, the Yu Qian could casually give the golden-winged crow bone beast to Jun Juqing to play with without caring about the lives of these divine beasts. What else would he not do? Yu Qian was so angry that he laughed. Are you trying to teach me a lesson? It was fine if the first messenger punished him and made him kneel for 3 days and 3 nights. After all, the other party's status and strength were higher than his. But, who was this Hua Shuang? Yu Qian was already in a bad mood. Now, Hua Shuang had hit the muzzle of the gun. If not him, who should she look for? Hua Shuang was neither servile nor overbearing. I don't dare. I'm just stating the facts. Of course, he could tell that the Yu Qian was angry. Actually, at this time, any normal person would know that they should take a step back and admit their mistake. But, Hua Shuang did not want to. Yu Qian's voice was deep and stern. Sheng Guanyu is used to being arrogant. Even your subordinates are the same. It seems that if I don't teach you a lesson, you won't know what's good for you. As he spoke, the aura on his body exploded. Hua Shuang's expression was tense. With his current strength, he obviously could not compete with the other party. There was no doubt that as long as the Yu Qian wanted to, he could finish him in one move. The piled-up leaves in the forest flew up. The air condensed, and the surrounding space seemed to be frozen. However, at this time, the little wind-stepping tiger suddenly climbed from Hua Shuang's back to his shoulder. Then, it jumped to the ground and stood in front of Hua Shuang. Ow! It roared fiercely at the Yu Qian. Unfortunately, it was still young, and its voice sounded very childish. It was not threatening at all. Yu Qian laughed when he saw this. What? You want to protect him with just you alone? You overestimate yourself. Ow! Fear flashed in the little wind-stepping tiger's eyes when it heard his voice. However, it quickly suppressed this emotion. It stood firmly in front of Hua Shuang. It looked like if the Yu Qian made a move, it would immediately fight to the death. Hua Shuang frowned and quickly picked up the little wind-stepping tiger. Second messenger, if you have any anger, just take it out on me. Why bother with it? Chapter 2407. Yu Qian didn't think much of it. After all, he didn't care about both humans and beasts. He couldn't do anything to the first divine emissary, but how could he not punish Hua Shuang? And this little bastard. Yu Qian rubbed the web between his thumb and forefinger. If he wanted to blame someone, he could only blame himself for being born in the wrong body. He had already killed the wind-striding tiger that bit him. This little one must be holding a grudge against him and wouldn't be able to be raised well. Since that was the case, he had to settle this once and for all. Therefore, Yu Qian's attitude was very firm. He glanced at Hua Shuang and sneered, how strange. Speaking of which, it's not even your contracted divine beast. Why are you doing this for it? He had thought that Hua Shuang was doing this because she had a contract with the wind-striding tiger. But after taking a closer look, he realized that wasn't the case. Hua Shuang's actions were even more laughable in Yu Qian's eyes. A-oh! The little wind-striding tiger roared at Yu Qian again. Hua Shuang stroked its head comfortingly and said, although we don't have a contract, a magical beast's life is still a life. These magical beasts were close to him, so he naturally saw them as friends. Ridiculous. A powerful and terrifying aura gathered in Yu Qian's palm. However, just as he was about to make a move, a clear cry suddenly came from the depths of the forest. Screech! Yu Qian frowned and looked over. A golden-winged skeletal beast flew over and blocked in front of Hua Shuangshuang without hesitation. The feathers on its body fluttered as it stared at Yu Qian as if it was looking at an enemy. Yu Qian looked at it and recognized that it was the one he had given to Jun Jiuqing. He knew that the golden-winged skeletal beast was saved by Hua Shuangshuang, but he didn't expect that it would be willing to go against him for Hua Shuangshuang. It had been raised by him on mythological Beast Mountain for the past few years. Yu Qian just opened his mouth when he suddenly paused. His expression turned serious as he looked behind Hua Shuangshuang. A pair of eyes filled with hostility suddenly appeared in the forest. Then, a second pair, a third pair. A rustling sound was heard. The mythological beasts that had just escaped had all returned at this time. They all came to Hua Shuangshuang's side and confronted the Yu Qian from afar. Strands of piercingly cold killing intent swept over, causing Yu Qian to be both shocked and furious. You! Are you rebelling? Herb Mountain. After picking the rest of the herbs, Little Hachi pulled Yan Qing back. Little Hachi was in a good mood. Today, she had completed her mission of pretending to be lovey-dovey and made Xu Jing suffer a setback. On the way, she chatted a lot with Yan Qing. Yan Qing, on the other hand, was as silent as ever. Other than occasionally chiming in or answering her questions, she spent most of the time listening to her quietly. After talking for a while, Little Hachi finally remembered something. She looked at Yan Qing, blinked her eyes, and asked, "Brother Yan Qing, do you think I'm noisy?" Yan Qing's face was expressionless. No. Her voice was soft and charming. It was different from other people's. Little Hachi patted his arm in satisfaction when she heard his answer. Under the thin shirt was a man's strong and slender arm. She smiled and said, "Brother Yan Qing, you're a promising child." As she spoke, she pulled Yan Qing and was about to enter the door. However, the door was opened as soon as they reached the door. A familiar face came into view. They looked at each other. Yuemo looked at the two people standing in front of the door in shock. Little Hachi had just returned. Yan Qing was still holding Little Hachi's slender and fair arm. Their hands were still holding each other's. Yuemo was stunned. He roared in his heart, "What's going on?" Who could tell him what had happened in this short period of time? Yan Qing, this brat, actually held the girl's hand. Little Hachi saw Yuemo and greeted him happily. Master Yuemo, long time no see." Yuemo swallowed hard. Little Hachi pulled Yan Qing in and turned to close the door. Only then did she let go of Yan Qing and raise her hands. "Don't worry, I'm just borrowing Master Yan Qing. I don't mean anything else." Yuemo's eyes twitched. "Use? How? He doesn't know anything other than killing people." How can you borrow?" Yan Qing threw a glare at him. Unfortunately, Yuemo was too shocked at this time and didn't notice the threat at all. Little Hachi smiled and winked at Yuemo. "Of course, I know that Master Yan Qing is very powerful, but he's also a man. He's very useful as a shield." Yuemo was dumbfounded. What did she mean? He suddenly thought of something and looked at Yan Qing. His eyes swept over Yan Qing with suspicion and shock. "No way, right?" Yan Qing frowned and a murderous look flashed across his eyes. Yuemo's strong desire to live finally made him come back to his senses and he immediately retracted his gaze. Little Hachi had already walked into the courtyard. Master and His Highness haven't come out yet." Yuemo hurriedly explained, "They're practicing chess and probably won't come out for a while." He also sensed the movements of his master and specially came to guard. "Miss Little Hachi, do you have something urgent?" "No, I don't." Since they were busy, she would wait for a while. Little Hachi finished speaking and said goodbye to the two and returned to her room. Umo didn't rush to Qing until her figure completely disappeared behind the door. He tried to suppress his excitement and said, "Brother. You're giving in." Digression, 6 p.m. Chapter 2408. Qing's gaze was as cold as a blade as he glanced at Umo. Umo immediately took a step back, fearing that the man in front of him would draw his sword. Hee, I'm just concerned about you." Qing turned around and walked away, not bothering with him. Umo chased after him, unwilling to give up. "Hey, say something. What's going on? Are you guys really together? Why didn't I know about it before? We're brothers after all. Why did you hide it from me so tightly?" Qing stopped in his tracks and looked at him coldly. "Noisy. So noisy." Umo was hit hard. He covered his heart with one hand and was extremely sad. "You heartless person. If it were someone else, I wouldn't even bother to ask." Wait." He suddenly realized that something was wrong and widened his eyes. "You mean, it's true?" This kid didn't deny it. Qing frowned slightly. He pursed his thin lips and was about to leave. Umo was so shocked that he froze on the spot. "Damn! Little Hachi is so beautiful. Why is her eyesight so bad?" Umo's voice stopped abruptly. He looked down at the scabbard on his neck and forced a smile. He stretched out his fingers and carefully pushed it away. I was just joking." Didn't he just say something from the bottom of his heart? Did he have to be like this? What's more, this was the truth. Tell me, what does little Hachi see in you?" Umo looked at him from head to toe and clicked his tongue. "There are so many people chasing little Hachi. What does she see in you?" "Your facial paralysis." Qing's gaze was so cold that it could kill. Umo raised his hands. "I'm telling you, I'm here to protect my master. If you kill me, all these things will fall on your head." Qing kept his sword. Umo leaned forward and asked in a low voice. "But speaking of which, does little Hachi know your identity?" Qing's expression froze. Umo snorted. "I knew she wouldn't know." Now, even the master's identity had not been revealed, so how could they? "I think little Hachi has a short temper. You'd better be careful not to lie to her. Otherwise, in the future." Qing frowned. "She has a good temper." Umo staggered and almost fell to the ground. What did you say?" This brat. Had he forgotten how little Hachi had chased after him and made trouble for him? Although Umo wasn't familiar with little Hachi, he had heard a lot of rumors about her. That was a powerful person who would slap the 8th divine emissary in the face if he didn't agree with him. How could such a person have anything to do with the words very good temper? Qing didn't even look at Umo as she left. Umo. He seemed to have been despised just now. Time passed. In the room, the game between Chu Liyue and Rong Xiu had just begun. Chu Liyue's palms were sweaty. Now, every time she placed a piece, it would consume a lot of her energy and strength. Therefore, her speed was very slow. Compared to the calm and composed Rong Xiu, she was in a difficult situation. Now, she could basically confirm that the black divine power in Rong Xiu's body was not weaker than the golden divine power he had always shown to the outside world. In fact, it was even stronger and more unpredictable. "You've let me win so many times in the past." "You're really patient," Chu Liyue snorted. Rong Xiu's lips curved into a faint smile. "I've always been like this to you. And his patience wasn't just limited to this. He didn't say the rest of the sentence. Chu Liyue rubbed the space between her eyebrows. She originally thought that this game could be over quickly. She could hold down Rong Xiu and get to the bottom of it. But now, it seemed that it would take a lot of time. At this moment, a loud sound suddenly came from outside. Boom! Chu Luiyue was shocked and immediately looked up. A silver tianlei quickly streaked across the sky. Chu Luiyue was stunned. The lightning pool had been sealed. Logically speaking, it shouldn't. Boom. 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 As if a door had suddenly opened, several tianlei streaks came one after another. It was late at night, and the sky was dark. The appearance of these tianlei instantly lit up the entire courtyard. It was dazzling. Most importantly, they were all heading in the same direction. Chu Luiyue was stunned for a moment, then quickly realized that it was the direction of Taizu. Was he refining a weapon? And this movement seemed a little different from before. It was more like, Chu Luiyue's heart skipped a beat. Taizu was trying to refine a divine artifact. Then, where did these tianlei come from? Soon, Chu Luiyue found the answer. These tianlei didn't come from the lightning pool, but, sister, are these enough? It was Aunt 12's voice. Chu Luiyue and Rong Xiu sat by the window. They could see the situation in the courtyard when they turned their heads. Aunt 12 was standing in the courtyard, holding a broken longsword in her hand. Beside her stood Aunt 11. Unlike her, Aunt 11 held a long spear in her hand. But at this time, it was also in pieces. Aunt 11 rubbed it and threw it away. It's not enough. Senior Tangku said before that divine artifacts are different from ordinary emperor and venerable artifacts. The amount of tianlei needed is very shocking. This is nothing. Aunt 11 nodded obediently. Oh. She rolled the broken sword in her hand into a ball and gently placed it beside her feet. Then, she took out a saber. Crack! That heavy and majestic saber instantly broke into two halves. Aunt 12 waved her hand, and several silver tianlei gushed out and went straight ahead. Chapter 2409. Chu Luiyue was speechless. After so many years, why do these two girls seem a little different from the others? If I'm not mistaken, that saber is a venerable artifact, right? And I've never seen it before. At this moment, a voice full of praise sounded. Not bad, not bad. Aunt 12 has improved a lot this time. Chu Luiyue turned her gaze and saw Tangku standing not far away from the two of them with his hands behind his back. He was looking at the two of them with a gratified and appreciative expression. The quality of these venerable artifacts can only be considered average. You two can practice first. I'll find you a few better ones later. Shengguan Jing wanted to forge a sacred artifact. The further he progressed, the higher the need for Tianlei's power. However, he had to prepare early. Once he broke through, he would officially step into the realm of a refining saint. For this day, Tangku had made sufficient preparations. He could not screw up at the most critical moment. When Aunt 12 heard the praise, her small face immediately blushed and she nodded vigorously. Okay. Thank you, Senior Tangku. She felt more energetic. Aunt 11 did not say anything, but her hands did not stop moving. Rays of tianlei flew out from those divine artifacts, almost illuminating the courtyard as if it was daytime. Tangku touched his chin. What's the big deal about the lightning pool being sealed? There are always more solutions than difficulties. Chu Luiyue was speechless. Although she had been looking forward to seeing Taizu break through, the current situation seemed to be different from what she had expected. Such a big movement naturally attracted the attention of others. Mu Hongyu's face was filled with amazement. So it can be like this. It's really amazing. Jian Fengqi said faintly. That's right. This young master has a part to play in these heavenly lightning. Mu Hongyu glanced at him. If you can really help Senior Shengwan Jing break through to become a refining saint, you'll benefit from it. TSK, you're really greedy. Jian Fengqi was speechless. Although these words made sense, why did it sound a little wrong? Mu Hongyu looked at Ant 11 and Ant 12 again. In the past, I only heard that they have big appetites. I didn't expect that they were actually waiting here. The astonishing energy was completely absorbed by the two of them, fusing into every inch of their bodies. As a result, they could now dismantle divine weapons with their bare hands. Even Her Eminence wouldn't be able to do it so smoothly, right? Speaking of which, the people around Lu Yu are quite powerful. God Beast Mountain. Yu Qian and Hua Shuangshuang were facing each other from a distance. More and more mythological beasts stood out and surrounded Hua Shuangshuang, forming a confrontation with the Yu Qian. The Yu Qian was extremely angry. Just as he was about to attack, he suddenly heard a voice. Wait! Yu Qian frowned and turned around. When he saw who it was, a trace of astonishment flashed across his face. Patriarch Mao Jin. Mao Jin walked over with a smile. Second Oracle, you're finally here. Waiting for me. After all, the other party was the patriarch of the Great Phoenix Dragon Clan. Yu Qian's attitude was still considered polite. Patriarch Mao Jin, are you looking for me? Of course. I wanted to have a good chat with you some time ago, but you didn't leave the illusory god palace, so I waited until now. Mao Jin spoke as if he had just seen Hua Shuangshuang. Oh, there's someone else here. His eyes swept across the mythological beasts around Hua Shuangshuang, and finally looked at Hua Shuangshuang with a deep gaze. Hua Shuangshuang cupped her fists and bowed. Greetings, Patriarch Mao Jin. Mao Jin waved his hand and smiled at the Yu Qian. Second Oracle, I wonder if it's convenient for us to talk. Yu Qian frowned quickly. After thinking for a moment, he nodded. Patriarch Mao Jin, please. As he spoke, he stared at Hua Shuangshuang. He couldn't touch him today, but there would be plenty of opportunities in the future. Mao Jin didn't seem to notice the subtle atmosphere between the two. Second Oracle, please. Then Yu Qian and Mao Jin left together, leaving only Hua Shuangshuang and the other mythological beasts. After the threat disappeared, Hua Shuangshuang exhaled softly. But for some reason, there was still a breath in his chest. It was uncomfortable and couldn't go up or down. Ow! The little wind-stepping tiger shouted in his arms. Hua Shuangshuang looked down and saw that the little thing was still trembling. It was obvious that it was still scared. But it still ran out without hesitation. And the surrounding mythological beasts, if it were someone else, they would be very happy and proud to have so many mythological beasts protecting them. But now, Hua Shuangshuang's heart was particularly heavy. When he saw the tragic death of the wind-stepping tiger last time, he knew that the second oracle in charge of the mythological beast mountain, Yu Qian, was not an easy person to deal with. Now that he saw it, it was indeed so. In his eyes, these mythological beasts were just objects that could be dealt with at will. He didn't care about them at all. Other than the wind-stepping tiger, there were many other mythological beasts that had similar or even worse situations. Hua Shuangshuang took a deep breath. Thank you for this time. You can all go back. As he spoke, he raised his arm and the golden-winged raven bone beast flew to his arm. He lifted his foot and left. Only a few reluctant gazes fell on him and wrapped around him. Hua Shuangshuang walked for a distance and stopped again. He lowered his head and looked at the dumpling tongue hanging on his waist. Peach Blossom Cove. Yujio was standing guard in front of the gate realm, playing with the wooden sword in his hand. It seemed that this one couldn't be used anymore. He had to get a new one. But fortunately, his big brother left him a few before he left. Suddenly, a distant sound of a zither came from the gate realm in front of him. Yu-Gi-Oh was shocked and immediately looked up. He saw a figure faintly visible in the dazzling mirror embedded in the gate realm. Digression, it was so hot today. Chapter 24:10. It was the figure of a woman. The light was blurry, and he could only vaguely make out a rough outline. Yu-Gi-Oh's heart skipped a beat. He subconsciously tightened his grip on the wooden sword in his hand and stared at it. Ever since this mirror appeared in the gate realm, this was the first time something like this had happened. He stared at the figure without blinking, trying to figure it out. Unfortunately, the scene was too vague, and he couldn't tell what it was. A faint pressure gradually spread out, and it even made Yu-Gi-Oh feel a deep sense of reverence in his heart. This is, however, in just a moment, the figure gradually dissipated. The dazzling light on the mirror shrouded over again, covering everything. It was as if everything was normal. However, Yu-Gi-Oh couldn't relax. He had never felt such a shocking pressure before. How could there be such a figure in the mirror? And who was that person? Yu-Gi-Oh was a little uneasy. However, for a long time, that scene didn't appear again. After a long time, he finally exhaled softly and looked back. On the horizon, a silver bridge stretched across the sky. It was quiet, majestic, and sacred. More and more Tianlei gathered. Shangguan Jing stood in the air. In front of him, there was a saber floating quietly. It was a long saber made of dark green copper. The blade was about 3 fingers wide and 1 finger thick. There was a groove on the back of the saber. At this moment, countless silver Tianlei came one after another and poured into the long saber in his hand. Sparks flew everywhere, and thunder rumbled. Shangguan Jing held his breath and stared at the long saber in front of him with full concentration, afraid that there would be a mistake. Originally, he thought that with the lightning pool sealed, there was no hope for this breakthrough. He didn't expect Ant 11 and Ant 12 to come and help. Also, there was Tang Ku. With so many external forces helping him, if he still couldn't succeed this time, then he really wouldn't have the face to face everyone. Everything had been going smoothly before. Now, there was only the most crucial point left, which was to summon the power of a chaos holy jade and pour it into it to refine into a saint. This step was easy to say, but it was extremely difficult to actually carry out. There were definitely many venerables in the Illusion God Palace. However, after so many years, there were very few who succeeded. Therefore, Shangguan Jing was extremely nervous. He raised his eyes and looked at the illusory God Palace that stood at the end of the horizon. Success or failure, it all depended on this. Then, he held the saber with both hands and poured the God power in his body into it. Chi! A glowing light suddenly flew out of the palace of illusory God, piercing through the dark sky and heading straight for Shangguan Jing. It's almost done. Seeing this scene, Tang Ku waved her fist, unable to hide her excitement. He was a weapon refining saint, so he was naturally the clearest about this. This time, Shangguan Jing would definitely become a saint. The commotion attracted the attention of countless people. Swish! Swish! The sound of air being torn apart could be heard. Many people appeared one after another. They raised their heads and focused their gazes, following that streak of lustrous light. This is... Someone is refining a sacred artifact. This movement doesn't come from the illusory God Palace. Looks like someone is about to break through to the weapon refining saint realm. Wait, that direction, why does it look like? As the gate of heaven closed, everyone was in a state of extreme nervousness. Now that there was such a huge commotion, it naturally caused an uproar among the crowd. At this time, even the slightest movement would attract a lot of attention, let alone something as big as breaking through to the weapon-refining saint realm. For a moment, countless people looked at Shangguan Jing following that streak of lustrous light. Soon, some sharp-eyed people recognized him. Isn't that Shangguan Jing? The one who came up with Shangguan Yu. He doesn't seem to have a bloodline totem. Why is he breaking through to the weapon-refining saint realm now? I heard that previously in the Divine Ruins world, he was an extremely top weapon-refining master. That's not right. Isn't the lightning pool already sealed? Where did those Tianlei come from? Shangguan Jing's breakthrough made many people envious and shocked. Even the origin of these heavenly lightning bolts made them extremely curious and confused. Aunt 11 looked up and put away the divine artifact in her hand. It should be enough. Sister, is it enough? Aunt 12 asked uncertainly. Aunt 11 nodded affirmatively. Tang Ku also nodded in agreement. The number of Tianlei is enough. Now it's up to him. Since it had progressed to this step, there was no need to worry about the rest. Oh, okay. Aunt 12 obediently put away the items. She seemed to have sensed something and looked up. At this moment, the streak of lustrous light broke through the air and landed on the long saber in front of Shangguan Jing. Boom! A loud noise was heard, and a powerful energy wave spread out in all directions. The streak of lustrous light instantly enveloped the saber. An indescribable aura began to surge out from it. Tang Ku was relieved. Shangguan Jing's talent in weapon refining was indeed very amazing. His guidance during this period of time was not in vain. Now, finally, what's that? A soft voice suddenly came from the side. Tang Ku turned and saw Aunt 12 looking up in a daze. She was the one who asked the question just now. Aunt 12, what are you asking? Tang Ku saw that her expression was a little strange and could not help but ask. He liked these two girls very much, so he was extra patient. 12th Madam pointed upwards and whispered, that, light? Tang Ku was stunned and then explained, oh, that's an aura from the Chaos Holy Jade. If you want to refine a holy weapon, you must have this thing. Aunt 12 nodded in realization, but her eyes were still fixed on the sky. No one knew what she was thinking. Then, she gently tugged at Aunt 11's sleeve. Aunt 11 looked back. The two of them looked at each other. Without needing to say anything, they already knew what each other was thinking. They really wanted to go over and take a look. Aunt 11 was more mature. After thinking carefully, she said, it's not convenient now. I'm afraid it's not convenient now. I'll think of something later. Aunt 12 nodded obediently. I'll listen to you. The two of them spoke very softly. Most of Tang Ku's attention was on Shangguan Jing, so he did not hear them clearly. Boom! A shocking aura descended upon the place. Shangguan Jing officially stepped into the realm of a weapon-refining saint. Chu Liuyue's eyes flashed slightly. She knew that Taizu would succeed, but she did not expect it to be under such circumstances. It was really not easy. It's your turn. A low and gentle voice came. She retracted her gaze and looked at the chessboard between the two of them again. Light surged on her fingertips. Without hesitation, she placed another piece. This time, she displayed an even more tyrannical strength than before. Paw! On the chessboard, waves of waves surged. However, it was only a moment before Rongxiu followed suit. A black chess piece fell next to her chess piece. All the waves were quietly annihilated. Chapter 24:11. Chu Luyue pressed her forehead. It was the same thing again. Every move she made was actually stronger than the previous one. But it didn't affect Rongxiu at all. No matter how much power she displayed, he was able to quickly catch up and easily devour all of the energy waves she stirred up. This was an all-around suppression. Chu Luiyue had never felt like this before. It seemed that no matter what she did, she couldn't bridge the gap between the two of them. She had long known that the man in front of her had been hiding his strength intentionally or unintentionally, so she didn't dare to relax or neglect him. But now, Rongxiu saw that she didn't move for a long time and raised his eyebrows. Why? Don't you want to play? I'm destined to lose. Chu Luiyue said softly. Not only would she lose, but she would lose miserably. Even if the two of them had just started, she could already see the ending. Rongxiu looked at her quietly. The bright light outside the window shone on her face through the window. Her skin was like jade, and her eyes were like stars. She lowered her eyes slightly, and her thick and curly eyelashes fluttered slightly. After a while, she chuckled softly. Even if I lose, I have to be clear about it. Besides, she wouldn't admit defeat until the end. Rongxiu's lips curved up into a smile. He already knew her answer and choice, so he was never worried that she would choose to give up in the middle. This was her. Chu Luiyue took a deep breath. Continue. Swish. Shengguan Jing held the long saber in his hand and made a light slash. The void in front of him was instantly cut open. His eyes lit up. A divine artifact was indeed extraordinary. He sorted out his emotions and flew down under the gazes of countless people around him. Senior Tang Ku, thank you. He came to Tang Ku and the others, cupped his fists and thanked them solemnly. If it weren't for Tang Ku's help, he didn't know when he could take this step. Tang Ku waved her hand with a smile. Why are you being so polite? You were able to break through to become a refining saint mainly because of yourself. Otherwise, with so many refining venerables, it wasn't that they didn't know how to succeed, but it was still very rare. The guidance and help of others only played a supporting role. In the end, the most important thing was still the person. Even without him, Shengguan Jing would be able to break through to become a refining saint sooner or later. If you really want to thank someone, you should thank these two girls. Tang Ku laughed and said, if they hadn't helped you gather so many heavenly thunders, there would have been no other way. Shengguan Jing also laughed and said seriously to the two girls. Aunt 11, Aunt 12, it's all thanks to you. 12 blushed and waved her hand. No, this was Masters Taizu. They were already very happy that they could do something to help. 11 said. This is what we should do, you don't have to be so polite. If you need the heavenly lightning in the future, just let me know. Over the years, the two of them had accumulated a lot of divine artifacts, and Tang Ku's inventory was also very shocking, so there was no need to worry even if the lightning pool was sealed. Shengguan Jing laughed and suddenly thought of something. It was indeed luck that I was able to succeed this time. However, I don't know how long the lightning pool will be sealed. As long as the lightning pool was not sealed, the refiners in the illusory god palace would be restricted for one day. This was really troublesome. As he spoke, he turned his gaze and looked somewhere. You and Rongxiu haven't come out yet. This game of chess seemed to have been going on for a long time, right? Tang Ku followed his gaze and narrowed her eyes. I think we'll have to wait for a while, Shengguan Jing thought for a moment and said. Then I'll wait for you, here first, and we'll enter the illusory god palace together later. Tang Ku wanted to say something but stopped. On the other side, Yu Qian and Mao Zhen had just walked out of the Divine Beast Mountain. As soon as they came out, they saw Tianlei flashing in the sky in the distance. The two paused in unison. Yu Qian narrowed his eyes and quickly realized what had happened. He frowned slightly. Someone has broken through to the refining saint realm, it seems to be Shangwanjing, Mao Zhen added. He was quite familiar with Shangwanjing, so although he was still quite a distance away, he quickly guessed the answer. Shangwanjing. Wasn't that Chu Liu's Taizu? Yu Qian knew this name, but he had never cared about it before. He didn't expect that he had successfully stepped into the refining saint realm. Yu Qian's face darkened. Chu Liyue wasn't enough, and now there were so many more people. Qi Han, Mu Hongyu, and Su Li, who had already entered the illusory god palace at the beginning, now, Shangwanjing had also become one. Would there be others who would continue to follow? Yu Qian felt uncomfortable when he thought of that scene. If it weren't for Dumpling and the music score, he wouldn't have taken Chu Liyue seriously at all. But now, he realized that the woman whom no one paid any attention to was breaking their expectations step by step and doing things that were beyond their imaginations. I really underestimated her. Mao Zhen raised his eyebrows slightly. Of course, he could hear the Yu Qian's disgust for Chu Liyue. Yu Qian looked at him. Patriarch Mao Zhen, why are you looking for me this time? Mao Zhen was about to speak when a woman's voice suddenly sounded. Second Divine Envoy. The two of them looked in the direction of the voice. Yu Qian frowned. Shu Jing, why are you here? He was in charge of this divine beast mountain, and the other divine envoys wouldn't come here under normal circumstances. Shu Jing was, second divine envoy, I have something important to. Shu Jing was halfway through his words when he saw Mao Zhen next to him. He couldn't help but pause. Yu Qian frowned. Chapter 24:12. Mao Zhen said that he had something to discuss with him, and Shu Jing actually followed him. How could it be such a coincidence that everything happened at the same time? Then who should he listen to first? Shu Jing glanced at Mao Zhen and said softly, Second Divine Envoy, it's about the Herb Mountain. Yu Qian's heart skipped a beat. Mao Zhen's gaze wandered back and forth between the two of them for a moment before he laughed. Second Divine Envoy seems to be very busy, so I'll make a long story short. I want to make a trip to Fengming Mountain, and I would like to ask for your permission. Yu Qian's expression was slightly cold, and he rejected without any hesitation. Patriarch Mao Zhen, I'm afraid that's not appropriate. Oh. Mao Zhen didn't seem surprised by his answer, and his expression didn't change. Second Divine Envoy, you don't have to think too much. I'm only going there to pay my respects to my ancestors. I don't have any other intentions. Yu Qian's pupils constricted, and his gaze was sharp and cold as he looked at Mao Zhen. Mao Zhen smiled, but there was no smile in his eyes. My ancestors have been dead for 10,000 years, but they have never been able to sleep. As a junior, it's really hard to feel at ease. Although it's for the illusory god palace and the divine master, it's not too much for me to want to pay my respects to them, right? Although he was smiling, his expression wasn't gentle, and there was even a hint of sharpness. Yu Qian stared at him for a long time before he raised his hand and threw out a jade pendant. Patriarch Mao Zhen, for Mao Yu's sake, I've always been polite to you. I hope you understand what you should do and what you shouldn't do. Mao Zhen held the jade pendant in his hand and looked at it for a while before smiling. Of course. After saying that, he nodded slightly at Shu Jing. I've said what I wanted to say, so I won't disturb the two divine envoys any longer. Then, he left without any reluctance, and his figure quickly disappeared from their sight. Shu Jing frowned. Second Divine Envoy, Mao Zhen is the patriarch of the great Phoenix Dragon race. I'm afraid it's not appropriate for you to let him go to Fengming Mountain just like that, right? What if he wouldn't dare? Yu Qian's tone was firm. He didn't seem to want to talk about this and changed the topic. You mentioned a herb mountain just now. What's going on? Shu Jing took a deep breath and briefly recounted what had happened. Seeing that Yu Qian's expression was getting uglier and uglier, Xu Jing's voice became softer and softer. She felt guilty. But she also knew that there was nothing she could do. Relying on herself, it was indeed impossible to solve the problem of the herb mountain. Xu Jing knows that he is incompetent and has failed to live up to the expectations entrusted to him by the higher-ups. However, the heavenly gate was about to close, and there was not much time left. Xu Jing was worried that something would happen if this dragged on. So, I have no choice but to ask for your help. Xu Jing is willing to bear any punishment. I only hope that you and the first oracle will consider it carefully. Don't wait until things are out of control before you deal with it. At that time, it will be really troublesome. Yu Qian was indeed very angry with Xu Jing, but her words were not without reason. This was a matter of great importance. Although they were angry, they could not really stay out of it. Yu Qian was silent for a long time. Then, he said coldly, "You didn't look for the first oracle about this matter?" Xu Jing looked hesitant. "I have already begged the first oracle several times before, but he refused to even meet me once. Let alone this matter." In desperation, she could only turn to Yu Qian for help. Yu Qian suddenly laughed. His voice was emotionless. "If you can't solve it, then this matter should be handed over to the first oracle. After all, I am only the second oracle. There are many things that I can't intervene in." Xu Jing was a little confused. Wasn't the second oracle in charge of the illusory god palace all these years when the first oracle was in seclusion? Why was he suddenly shirking his responsibilities now? What was going on? Xu Jing had known Yu Qian for a long time. She knew very well that Yu Qian would definitely be happy to solve these matters. But his attitude now, was it because the first oracle punished him by kneeling outside the door for 3 days? She muttered, "But the first oracle is unwilling to do anything. If even you. Then what should we do if something really happens?" The consequences were not something that she could bear alone. "Second oracle, why don't you go and ask the first oracle personally?" The only one who was qualified to do so was the Yu Qian. However, Yu Qian's face became even gloomier after hearing this. He didn't want to go to the first oracle and be rejected again. But he had to solve this matter. After thinking for a while, he finally said, "You will go with me." In the quiet courtyard, leaves were piled up. A strong white figure suddenly flew over. It was Xue Xue. It landed gracefully, looked around, and then roared in a certain direction. Roar! There was no response. Xue Xue was stunned. A trace of doubt flashed in its ice-blue eyes. Roar! It roared again, but no one paid attention to it. What was going on? Previously, when it came, Hongyao would come out to play with it. It leaped onto the pile of leaves and scratched it a few times with its claws. Leaves flew everywhere. Hongyao was nestled inside, looking listless. Xue Xue tilted its head, raised its claws, and gently pushed it. Hongyao gave it a fierce look. Very annoying. Don't disturb. Xue Xue was inexplicably angered and was confused. It subconsciously looked at the house next to it. Why are you angry with your master? Why are you venting your anger on me? Suddenly, a knock came from outside. Knock knock. Hongyao. I'm here to look for you. Dumpling's cute and clear voice sounded. Hongyao immediately turned over and fanned Xue Xue's head with its wings. Xue Xue didn't care about it. It anxiously looked around. Where? Where? It had to find a place to hide. Digression, the wind blows, it blows until 6:00 update drops. Chapter 24:13. Puff, Shue Shue plunged into the pile of fallen leaves. Hong Yao glanced at it and looked at its exposed snow-white tail with disdain. What a waste of such a big head. Its brain was also not very bright. Hong Yao raised its wings and helped Shue Shue, which was rare. It piled the fallen leaves on Shue Shue's body and barely covered it. After tidying everything up, it flew outside. It couldn't open the door, so it could only fly in the air. Bang! The red demon bumped into the barrier. Dumpling, who was waiting outside the door, heard the sound and looked up. With a light tap of her toes, she flew into the air, only separated from Hong Yao by a barrier. Hong Yao turned around and glared at Mu Qinghe's room. Hey! It shouted angrily. After a while, a hole finally opened in the barrier. Hong Yao immediately flashed out. Tuanzi brought it over at once. Hong Yao. She followed Hong Yao's line of sight and glanced over. Although she couldn't see anything, Dumpling was still angry at the thought that Mu Qinghe was inside. If it weren't for Hong Yao, she wouldn't have come here again. Suddenly, Dumpling glanced at the courtyard from the corner of her eyes and was slightly stunned. Just now. Why did she feel that there was a familiar aura? Her little brows furrowed slightly. Logically speaking, there shouldn't be anyone else here except for Mu Qinghe and Hong Yao, right? Then just now, just as she was thinking, Dumpling felt that something was pulling the corner of her dress. It was Hong Yao who was dragging her out. It was not appropriate here. She'd better find another place to talk. Dumpling felt that it made sense. She immediately dispelled the doubts in her heart, picked up Hong Yao, and put it on her shoulder. Hong Yao, come with me. Dumpling took Hong Yao back to Chu Liuyue's residence. Although there weren't many people in the palace of the illusory god, none of them were simple. If they saw Dumpling and the red demon together, it would cause some trouble. Therefore, after thinking for a while, Dumpling decided to take Hong Yao back. Even if it was Mu Qinghe's magical beast, it was still her friend. During this period of time, Dumpling had been struggling with this matter for a long time. In the end, she still felt that she couldn't break off her friendship with Hong Yao. Instead of suffering like this, it was better to take the initiative to attack. So today, while Chu Liyue was not in the palace of the illusory god, she went to find Hong Yao. When he returned to his residence, Chi Han was still guarding the place. However, when he saw that Dumpling had brought Hong Yao back, his expression didn't change much. Instead, he let them in directly. After entering the room, Tuanzi closed the door and asked straightforwardly, Hong Yao, break the contract with Mu Qinghe. Hong Yao was stunned. In fact, it had already guessed Dumpling's thoughts, but when it heard it for real, it still felt a little shocked. Seeing that Hong Yao was silent, Dumpling leaned over and asked, is it because he won't let you go? Then I'll go find him later. Hong Yao shook its head. Dumpling frowned. Hong Yao, he doesn't treat you well at all. Why do you continue to stay with him? Come back and stay with us, and you. Isn't that good? She really felt that Hong Yao was not good at all with Mu Qinghe. If it could come back and continue to be with them, that would be the best. A light flashed across Hong Yao's eyes, but it quickly dimmed down. If it could, of course, it also wanted to do so. But, Hong Yao was silent for a long time and finally shook its head dejectedly. Dumpling looked at it in a daze. She had thought that Hong Yao would definitely agree to her proposal. Even if it didn't agree, it must be because it was afraid of Mu Qinghe. But now, it seemed that Hong Yao was unwilling to do so. Why? Dumpling was puzzled. Hong Yao, why? Although Mu Qinghe was its master, you had been very good to it all these years. Didn't it always want to follow you? Hong Yao turned its head away and refused to speak. Dumpling moved her head closer, and Hong Yao turned its head away. Dumpling went around it again, and Hong Yao turned around again. After this, Dumpling's patience was exhausted. She puffed up her cheeks. If you really don't want to, then I won't force you. Although she was a little puzzled, Dumpling couldn't get angry in her heart. Last time, Hong Yao found out about what happened in the illusionary god sea. It could be seen that Hong Yao still treated Yu the same as before. But for some reason, it refused to agree to leave Mu Qinghe. Even though it was clearly very angry with Mu Qinghe, it didn't matter. But what exactly happened to you all these years? You can tell me, right? Dumpling sat down on the stool opposite Hong Yao. Also, Hong Yao, did you already know that Mu Qinghe betrayed you back then? Hong Yao immediately shook its head frantically. How could it do this to you? Dumpling stared at it closely. You're his contractual fiend. You should know something, right? Hong Yao's eyes flashed with a hint of struggle. Chi Han stood outside the door. The illusionary god palace was as cold and lonely as ever. His eyes were deep, and the scar on his face added a bit of coldness to him. No one knew what he was thinking. Bang! The sound of the door being opened was heard. Chi Han turned around and saw a green shadow flying out quickly. Then, Dumpling also ran out, stood by the door, and shouted, Go away. Don't come back if you leave. I won't talk to you anymore. Her small face was flushed red with anger, and her grape-like eyes were filled with glistening tears. Chi Han frowned. Did she quarrel with Hong Yao? Chapter 24:14. Hong Yao didn't even look back. In the blink of an eye, it disappeared. Dumpling stood there alone, holding the door frame with one hand. She pursed her lips, raised her hand, and wiped away her tears. Then, she turned around and went back into the house. Bang! She slammed the door shut without hesitation. Obviously, she was very angry. Chi Han frowned even more. When they came back together, everything was fine. How come in the blink of an eye? He hesitated for a moment, then walked over and knocked on the door. Dumpling. Since his master wasn't around, he had to take care of her. After a short silence, a sobbing sound came from the room. Woo-woo, Chi Han paused. After thinking for a while, he swallowed the rest of his words and continued to guard the door. Yu Qian and Xu Jing soon arrived in front of Mu Qinghe's courtyard. Looking at the still tightly shut door, the two of them looked at each other. Both of them had suffered here before. At this time, they were naturally more afraid. But this matter had to be resolved. Yu Qian raised his chin at Xu Jing. You can talk about the trouble in the Herb Mountain yourself. Xu Jing's heart skipped a beat, but he didn't dare to say anything. He could only walk forward. She knew that Yu Qian had been punished to kneel for 3 days and 3 nights. It was already very rare for him to come with her. She didn't dare to ask Yu Qian to do anything else. However, just as she arrived in front of the door, before she could speak, she suddenly heard the sound of wings flapping. She subconsciously looked up and saw a green sparrow covered in green flames. It crossed the barrier and flew into the courtyard. Xu Jing was shocked. Then, she quickly turned around and looked at Yu Qian. Second Oracle, did you see that just now? It seemed to be a 9th grade green sparrow. Yu Qian also frowned. When did such a magical beast appear in the palace of the illusory god? And it seemed to have a close relationship with the first oracle? Otherwise, it would never fly into this place. The first oracle has a contracted magical beast. When did this happen? Xu Jing looked confused. None of the divine envoys had a contract with a magical beast. Only the second divine envoy, Yu Qian, was in charge of the mythological beast mountain. But now, Yu Qian shook his head and said in a deep voice, I don't know about this. After a moment, he urged. Forget it. This is not something that you and I can ask about. It is better to report the matter as soon as possible and let the first messenger make a decision. Shu Jing could only nod. Yes. She took a deep breath, turned around, and bowed respectfully. First Oracle, Shu Jing has something important to report. A moment later, an indifferent and cold voice came from inside. I already know about the barrier. You can go back now. Shu Jing choked. This. She hadn't said anything yet, but the first divine emissary already knew. Yu Qian's expression also changed. Over the years, the first oracle had almost never come out. But many things in the illusory god palace didn't seem to escape his control. This also made Yu Qian secretly shocked again. He thought that the first oracle had made up his mind to delegate power, but in fact, he didn't have this intention at all. How could he compete with such a person? Yu Qian suppressed the chaotic thoughts in his heart and took the initiative to ask. First Oracle, this matter is of great importance. Shu Jing alone can't solve it. You don't plan to do anything. The gate of heaven is about to close. The voice continued to sound. I have my own plans. With just a few words, he had already expressed his attitude. Shu Jing and Yu Qian exchanged glances and saw a bit of confusion in each other's eyes. At this point, the first oracle still didn't show up. He said he had his own plans. What did he mean? Shu Jing wanted to continue asking, but Yu Qian had already spoken. Yes. We know. After saying that, he gave Shu Jing a look. The two of them left in unison. After walking for a while, Shu Jing couldn't help but ask. Second Oracle, what do you think the first Oracle is planning to do? So many things have happened in the illusory god palace during this period, but he refused to show up. He can't be like this when the gate of heaven closes, right? Impossible. Yu Qian immediately denied her guess. At that time, even the emperor will descend, let alone him. We just have to wait. Anyway, they had already said what they needed to say. If something really happened, it couldn't be completely blamed on them. Hearing that name, Shu Jing suddenly felt a deep sense of respect and fear. Immediately, she suddenly thought of something and asked hesitantly. By the way, there's something. Second Oracle, do you know what the left divine general has been busy with recently? Yu Qian glanced at her. How would I know this? The left divine general and the right divine general were the emperor's most trusted confidants. They were also the two strongest generals under him. Their status was respected and their strength was unfathomable. Even he didn't dare to treat them casually in front of those two. How would he know this? Shu Jing nodded with some disappointment. In fact, she had already expected this result, but she was unwilling to accept it and still wanted to ask clearly. Why are you suddenly asking this? Nothing. Shu Jing forced a smile and casually came up with an excuse. But who was Yu Qian? He could see Shu Jing's thoughts clearly. But he didn't point it out. It's almost time. At that time, they will definitely appear with the emperor. If you're not in a hurry, just wait patiently. Yes. Waiting was always especially unbearable. Shengguan Jing glanced at the room again in confusion. It's been so long. These two. This game of chess, haven't they finished yet? In the room, Chu Luiyue stared at the chessboard in front of her. Her lips were slightly pale. She rubbed the chess piece in her hand and suddenly thought of something. She looked up at the man opposite her. It was also you in the Red Moon Desert. Rong Xiu's lips curled up slightly, but he didn't comment. Chu Luiyue paused. De Bao and the others knew your identity long ago. Digression, if there was a secret that needed everyone to hide together. What would it be? Chapter 24:15. Rongxiu pondered for a moment, as if thinking about how to answer this question. But in Chu Liuyue's eyes, this reaction was already a clear answer. She sneered. This man had hidden it from her so deeply. But anyway, De Bao and the others had done similar things a long time ago. When she came to the illusory god palace for the first time and saw the Xian formations on the star path, she knew that some things were no longer under her control. In contrast, she quickly accepted Rongxiu's identity as the first master. Rongxiu paused and said, "They didn't know about what happened to Yao Qin at the beginning." Chu Liuyue's eyebrows moved slightly. What does this mean? She narrowed her eyes slightly and fixed her gaze on the man in front of her. Rongxiu. Why are you suddenly telling me this at this time? Chu Liyue asked softly. First master, if Rongxiu didn't take the initiative to say it, she probably would never have thought of it. It didn't seem to matter even if these things were to be buried under the dust of time. But he still said it, and at this time. Rongxiu smiled. There are some things that you will know eventually. In the past, he didn't want her to know and did everything possible to hide it. But now, he still had to say it. Rongxiu thought of something and a layer of darkness covered his eyes. Bright flowing lights flickered and were reflected in his eyes, silently gathering. Chu Liyue couldn't see through it. Rongxiu was very thoughtful. Although she thought the same as this man most of the time, when he didn't want to show anything, no one could see through his thoughts. Including her. Rongxiu suddenly asked, aren't you angry? Chu Liyue rested her chin on one hand and rubbed the chess piece thoughtfully with the other. Why should I be angry? Although you hid it from me, didn't you tell me now? She was actually not particularly concerned about this matter. Because she knew that he would never hurt her. This was an absolute certainty that came from the depths of his heart, a will that was even engraved in his bones and blood. But after this round, you have to answer all my questions truthfully. Rongxiu's lips curved up. Of course. Chu Liyue made up his mind and finally put down the chess piece in his hand. Time passed. These two children haven't come out yet. Are they planning to wait until the divine gate closes? In the courtyard, Shengwan Jing sat on a stone bench, speechless. He had been waiting for a long time, but the doors of the two were still tightly shut, with no intention of coming out. Apart from the fluctuations that he could faintly sense from the barrier, there was nothing else. After thinking for a moment, he suddenly stood up. Forget it. I'm not waiting anymore. He should first go to the illusory god palace to take a look. He knew that Dugu Maobao and Lan Shao were trapped inside. Previously, he wanted to wait for Chu Liyue because he wanted to go with her and see if they could cooperate to find some clues. But now that she had not come out, she would probably be busy for a while. He could not wait any longer. Senior Shengwan, are you going to the palace of the illusory god? A crisp voice could be heard all of a sudden. Shengwan Jing turned his head. Aunt 11. Yes, what's wrong? Aunt 11 thought for a moment and shook her head. My sister and I also want to go to the palace of the illusory god, but it might be a little difficult. Shengwan Jing was a little curious. I heard the two of you talk about this before. Why? Are you curious about what it's like inside? Why don't I come back later and tell you about it? Aunt 11 shook her head. No. It's just. She was not curious. She just wanted to go in. But this feeling was really hard to describe. She pursed her lips. Then I wish you the best. Shengwan Jing did not think too much about it. He just thought that Aunt 11 and Aunt 12 were still children and wanted to go to the palace of the illusory god to take a look. Not to mention them, who in the entire palace of the illusory god didn't want to go in? It was normal. Just as he got up, he heard another series of footsteps. Hey! Shangguan! Wait! Shangguan Jing turned his gaze and saw Tang Ke walking over quickly. Then, Tang Ke handed over a jade bracelet. This is the interspatial bracelet I just made recently. There are some things I prepared for Lizzie in it. Can you help me send it over? Shangguan Jing subconsciously took the bracelet and looked at him strangely. Senior Tang Ke, if you want to send it over, can't you go yourself? He was also a refining saint. It was easy for him to go in. Why did he have to ask him for help? The corner of Tang Ke's eyes twitched. Ahem, this. I still have something to deal with, so I may not be able to go for the time being. Shangguan Jing looked suspicious. Something. What could happen to him? If it was before, Tang Ke was mostly helping to guide him, it would be understandable. But now, he had successfully broken through to become a refining saint. Logically speaking, Tang Ke should be free, right? Besides, everyone knew how Tang Ke treated Su Li. He clearly missed Su Li very much, but he refused to go to the palace of the illusory god. Senior Tang Ke, is it inconvenient? Shangguan Jing asked tentatively. Tang Ke hurriedly waved his hand. No, no. I really can't get away for the time being. Wait for a while, I'll go over. Shangguan Jing did not quite believe his excuse, but since the other party had already said so much, there was no need to continue asking. He nodded. Senior Tang Ke, don't worry. I'll definitely help you send it over. Tang Ke secretly heaved a sigh of relief, gave a few more instructions, and went back. The door was closed. Shangguan Jing was stunned. It seemed that Tang Ke really did not plan to go now. He put away the bracelet and headed in the direction of the palace of the illusory god. Shangguan Jing entered the palace of the illusory god very smoothly and quickly found Su Li's residence. He asked you to send it over. Su Li played with the bracelet in her hand. Her usually gentle eyebrows were tinged with interest at this time. It seems that he's really busy. Shangguan Jing was speechless. Why did he suddenly feel cold? But fortunately, Su Li still accepted the bracelet. She raised her head and asked, "How is little Yu now? I haven't seen her these few days." Shangguan Jing briefly explained the situation to him. Su Li suddenly understood. I see. But, Holy Sun is really strange. Why does he want to play chess with little Yu, at this time? Shangguan Jing shook his head. Both of them have their own ideas. Maybe they have other plans. Rong Xiu's strength is tyrannical. The two of them can also improve their strength by exchanging pointers. He was also familiar with Rong Xiu. He deeply knew that the strength he displayed was far from what it seemed on the surface. Su Li nodded and said, "You're right. But now little Yu has finished walking the Star Road and comprehended all the Xian formations on it. Logically speaking, she's already very powerful. After a while, the gate of heaven will close. I don't know if she can ascend to heaven and become a god at that time." You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.